like to welcome everyone to the Washington City Council chambers for our regular meeting. I appreciate your patience with us. We actually had a work session at the police station next door and got a lot of work done, and we need to rush. We're a little bit rushed to get over to here. So anyway, today is November 9th. We're just after 6 p.m. We're at Washington City Hall. This meeting is also broadcast live on our YouTube link at washingtoncity.org/meetings. We're going to start off with an invocation. We continue to appreciate the services of the Interfaith Council. And tonight it's my pleasure to invite and welcome one of my closest friends, the Reverend Dr. Ralph Klingon from the Good Shepherd Presbyterian Church. We have run a number of marathons together and spent a lot of time together. And so it's just really my pleasure to invite him to come forward and say whatever you'd like to say, Reverend. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor Staley and the City Council. On behalf of the Interfaith Council, I'd like to offer our great thanks and appreciation for your inviting us to take part in your City Council meetings. Let us join in prayer. Gracious Lord, we do give you thanks for the gift of the rains that nourish the earth and for the beauty of this day, and now for the gift of our nation, conceived upon the ideals of liberty and justice for all. We uplift to you now especially the city of Washington City. We'd ask for your special care for its mayor and city council as they seek to reflect your will. Guide them in all their deliberations, that indeed it may reflect their great love for this community, its citizens, the hopes and dreams for all who live and serve here. As well, look upon their families who have offered their loved ones in special service to this community. We do give you thanks and praise for good neighbors, friends, all who share life together and together build up the life of this community, this city, and our nation. Continue now to bless and keep the Washington City Council and its mayor this evening and all days. For this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I'm going to go grab Tristan.
Thank you, Reverend. We appreciate you. If you'll stay for just a few minutes as we get through announcements. I've asked Ian Allen of the Washington City Concert Band if he'd come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ian.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we are absolutely thrilled to have the Washington City Concert Band. We love the brass, we love the winds, we love all of the instruments and talented musicians who represent us so well. They are going to favor us with the national anthem, and we're going to talk a little bit more during announcements about an event coming up. Bob, would you like to come forward and get us started on that? Absolutely amazing. I still have chills from the first note. Band, if you'll stay with us just for a moment here. How fitting to have the national anthem played the day after elections, right? And the freedoms that we have to live in this country. And 2 days before we celebrate Veterans Day. We broke away during our meeting, and if you notice when you leave tonight, there's a field of flags out there at Veterans Park. And it's a pretty special sight. The lights are shining on flags, and Washington City is the place to celebrate Veterans Day on Friday. There'll be a program. The parade starts at 11 a.m. and there's a program at noon, and we just invite everybody to be there. We look forward to honoring all veterans at that program. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so hang tight for just a minute. I need to get this agenda approved. And before I do, council, let me just make note of some items here. On the consent agenda, items 5F, 5G, 5H, and 5K. I'd like to have those items pulled from the agenda. There was an agreement that has not quite been taken care of and a bond that has not quite been finished up, and we appreciate the work that's been done on those items, but they're just not ready for your approval. So we'll ask, when I ask for an approval of the agenda, I'll ask that we strike those from the agenda. Those will likely come forward in December. I'll also make note that we do need to go to closed session for purchase, exchange, release of property, and pending or potential litigation. Council, is there anything else on the agenda that you see?
So we can pull those at the start of the agenda. I just want to make sure we don't have to just table them. Or
Council, saying I understand that we're pulling those items.
I think it's the same difference, pull them or table them, either way. The challenge with tabling them is we don't really know the date certain that they will be ready. We hope that they'll be ready for next meeting, but I would just suggest we pull them, get them put on the next agenda that they're ready for.
So with that said, I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda, striking the items that I listed.
Mayor, I'll make that motion that we approve the agenda, striking item 5F, G, H, and K from the agenda.
I have a motion by Councilman Coates.
Second.
Second by Councilman Martinson. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved as amended. Okay, let's get on to those announcements. So Veterans Day, during that event, we will have the privilege of honoring 118 Cold War era veterans with a medal and a certificate of recognition. That's on Friday, November 11th. On Saturday, November 12th, is the Crop Walk, and that's hosted by the Interfaith Council. That will be meeting at Larkspur Park at 9:30 a.m. Reverend Klingon, is there anything else that I should explain or that you'd like to explain to this group about the Crop Walk and the significance of that event?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be the 13th area crop walk. It is a walk where our participants pledge and offer money and raise it for local hunger causes and international hunger programs. This will be our 13th crop walk, and so far, as Interfaith Council, we have raised $80,000. Wow. Of course, a significant portion stays here, and we have the option of donated in several years. We have donated to Solomon's Feast, which offers a hunger program on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Reverend. Appreciate it. On Tuesday, November 15th, our very own Washington City Concert Band will present a Mystical Journey, a fantasy-filled concert, and that will be held at Fossil Ridge Intermediate. Sarah, would you come forward and tell us a little bit of the themes of of the concert and also just clarify the time that starts. I forgot to put that on my notes.
That's okay. You want me to use this, huh?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So it's 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 15th. You already said that part. At Fossil Ridge in their gym. And we will be playing, as the poster suggests, mystical fantasy, a lot of stuff about elves and things of that nature. It's great. Lots of couple Lord of the Rings pieces, some How to Train Your Dragon, things of that nature. I like to call it nerd music because, well, who's not? So
We've all got a little nerd in us. I love it. It's going to be
a lot
fantastic.
of fantasy type themes in each of these songs, and they're pretty great. It should be a longer program than I think you and us are used to, so it should be great.
Well, we appreciate the invitation. I know the council's all aware of that. We're going to do our best to get there and have our families there and just enjoy the evening with you. You represent us so well.
Thank you, guys.
That's why I wanted you to stay around just a little bit so you could make sure to fill in those blanks.
So thank you for having us tonight also.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you. Just a couple more announcements, and that'll be a good spot to move. Sarah?
Yes.
You almost made it back there.
I waited too.
I love the shirts. The shirts look great. Can I put you on the spot? I
Sure.
already have.
It's fine. I'm already here and I'm already nervous. Let's go.
Would you just, everyone that's here tonight made a special sacrifice to be here and just favor us with the national anthem and just share their talents. I would just like to, you could share the names with the council so we know them better. Or can we point and have them tell us their names? What do you think?
Oh, it's a pop quiz. I think I can do okay.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, some of
It's
them.
like the family reunion where you
Boy.
introduce your table.
So also I want to say that this is a small number of us. We do actually currently have close to 50 members. So this is a very small group compared to our larger group. So all the way over here, we got Ian Allen. You met him already. And then Coralie. And then we got she's on a board of the band right now. And that's Mackenzie. And then we got Darla in the front and Mark. Right? Oh, good. I got that right. And then we got Kyan. Did I say that right? Excellent. And then David in the back and Katie and then Chris. And then I always forget our poor trumpet he helps me every week set up chairs and I forget. James. It's James. And then Michael. Yes. And then Bob.
Bob Fox, right?
Bob Fox, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Am I cleared?
For now, in
want me
case
to wait and then come back?
we're going to go through a few more announcements, and then we'll excuse you.
Excellent. No worries.
So Thanksgiving is on the 24th of November. City Hall will be closed on the 24th and the 25th. We do not have a scheduled council meeting on Wednesday, the 23rd, in observance of that holiday. Christmas in Dixie is always the last Saturday. Christmas in Dixie is on November 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. I know there's a pattern to it. I just can't remember when. First Monday after Thanksgiving. Thank you, Sarah. So often that's in November. And so it's going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. right here at Veterans Park. The power department will put up the giant tree. There'll be music and entertainment and wagon rides up to the Covington home with Santa there, and it's just kind of think Whoville. It's just going to be a great night. And then the last announcement that I have is the St. George Area Chamber is hosting an event they call 30 in their 30s, and that's on November 30th. It starts at 6:30 p.m. It's at the Hilton Garden Inn. The city has a table there, and there may or may not be someone in their 30s from our city who will be recognized at their event. Council, that's all the announcements I have. Is there anything I may have overlooked? Band, thank you. We appreciate you unless you want to stay. Item number 3, council, any declarations of abstentions and conflicts? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, introductions. I've invited Megan Carter, and she is married to Sergeant Carter in Washington City PD, and I'm going to invite her to come forward and tell us and those in the audience about a great event called Wreaths Across America. And anyway, I'll let her explain that and tell us where we are. Megan.
Thanks. You got me right as I was signing in. I'm Megan. I run Wreaths Across America for Washington City Cemetery, and I have been doing that since 2020, so a couple of years now. 2019, as far as I know and what Glenn has told me, Glenn Evans, is the first year that Washington City participated in Wreaths Across America, and they placed 330 wreaths for veterans. Well, I think they placed
Pull that mic up right there,
325.
Megan. Pull the mic up. There you go. So,
So they-
like, so you can talk into it.
So they placed about 325 wreaths for the veterans because they had a couple of extras that year. The next year was my first year, and we placed 355 wreaths for veterans. And ever since I got involved, I do all the fundraising myself. It's just community based. We go to businesses, me and my assistant go to businesses and community and try and get the donations for it. So my first year, we raised $5,325 in sponsorships for the wreaths to get those sponsored. And then last year we had 380 veterans we had to place wreaths for. So the numbers have been jumping a lot, thanks to COVID, I'm assuming. This year, as of the 3rd of November, my last count was 417 veterans that we'll be placing. There will be more. My guesstimation is I'll probably end up having to order 325 wreaths. That's just a number I throw out. I have to have them locked in by November 30th, so I usually have my count and I add 5, just to be safe.
What's the number again? How many?
425 is what I'm thinking we're gonna need, because right now we have 417 veterans buried. So that is gonna come out to $6,375 that I'll be doing for fundraising. So we've got a lot of work to do. Currently, we are at 176 wreaths have been paid for. I do have pledges for more, but until they come through, I don't count them, just in case. And so one of the great things that I've discovered with this current mayor and this current administration is there is a lot more city support for Wreaths Across America than I've ever experienced. My first year, I was actually told not to advertise it too heavily and to not interrupt with the Veterans Day event at all, as though they were two separate events in competition with one another. And that has not been the case this year. Mayor has actually invited me to be at the Veterans event. We'll have a booth there so people can sponsor wreaths and donate. We're walking in the parade and passing flyers. Hopefully it's gonna be great and get a lot more community involved. We would also love to see the city get behind Wreaths Across America and fund a little bit of it as well. We don't want it to be fully funded by the city. We want it to be a community event. But the higher that number gets, the harder it gets for us to get those wreaths sponsored every year.
What's a standard wreath donation? What does a wreath cost? One.
$15.
15?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's all done through Wreaths Across America. It's a nonprofit organization that started back in Arlington. And now they place wreaths on graves all over the US through local volunteers like myself that organize it. And we all place wreaths at the same time on the same date. So all over America at the exact same time, wreaths are being placed for veterans. It's a really beautiful thing. We all have a presentation that we give that they send to us and say, here's what we'd like you to say. And we give our presentation, and when the wreaths are placed, they place the wreath, they say the veteran's name out loud, they take a moment of silence for that veteran. So we make sure that no veteran is ever forgotten. So that's why it's important to us that we make sure we have all these wreaths, because man, I'd hate to be the one that's like, sorry, your veteran doesn't get a wreath this year. Maybe next year. It's not really what we're wanting to do. So let's see. Oh, a few things. So right now, currently, Washington City is actually the only cemetery that doesn't have some city support for their Wreaths Across America program. So last year, Hurricane became the last city other than ourselves to get funding from the city council. and they approved, I can't remember exactly how much the city council throws in now, but they support and they donate to the Hurricane Support Foundation. Yes, Hurricane Valley Support Foundation every year to kind of sponsor at least a couple hundred wreaths for them, because they actually have more veterans buried in their cemetery than we do right now, because they're over 500. But at the rate we're headed, it's not going to take us much longer to get there. So that's my spiel. I do have flyers for all of you so that you guys know the date and time that we'll be placing the wreaths, so you guys can all come out.
Announce that. Announce
Oh,
that
yes.
date again.
Yes. So we will be placing wreaths December 17th at 10 a.m. at the cemetery. So will you pass those up to them? Those are for them. And there's one for each of you, so that last year Mayor Staley came out and it was awesome to have him out there. And so hopefully we can get more of you guys out here this year.
Megan, will you tell us a little bit? So I appreciated Councilman's question about the cost. It's $15 for one wreath, but if you buy multiple,
Yes. So when I got involved with the program, I got the city registered with them as a nonprofit organization for that, so that we could be in a area where every 2 wreaths that are sponsored through my specific website that we set up as the organization group, every 2 Wreaths Across America gives us a free wreath. So if you donate through the QR code on this flyer, then essentially the cost is $10 a wreath.
so buy 2, get 1.
Yep, that's kind of how that works. We do have another little organization that doesn't do a lot with it, but they're starting to do a little bit more, and hopefully they keep going more with that, and that's the Pineview ROTC. They do a little bit of fundraising, but they're also involved in that day. They do a color guard and all sorts of stuff for us. But theirs is a $15 straight cost because they have a different program they're under as a school.
You know, the program that you do up there is fantastic. I mean, each of the branches are represented.
Yes.
You know, I went with my 3 daughters, and it was just a really special day for us, and especially for them to take a moment and just to recognize at Christmas time,
Yep.
The sacrifice that those veterans have given. And so I just love your vision. I love what you've done. I'm confident that this council is inspired to support. I look out across the audience. I'm confident that a few business owners might catch you on the way out too, and
That would be nice.
and help with that.
I would definitely not say no to that. And the kids being out there is a big part of what we do with Wreaths Across America, and it's a big part of our mission statement, is to not let the young generation forget what's come before them, and to make sure they understand the honor and sacrifice that was made for them. So that's why we've got the ROTC, they come out. So we've got a big group of teenagers that spend a Saturday before or an afternoon before the event. They come out and they clean the cemetery for me and prepare it for the event. And they come out and help with the wreaths and sacrifice their time to be there. And then we always go out to the elementary schools and invite them all to send their kids, over if they want to come out and bring their families. And it's really a great thing.
And how much do you personally get paid for this?
Nothing. This is volunteer.
Yeah,
I do this
okay.
to myself. Yep, this is a volunteer thing. Me and Sarah are crazy, I think.
Yeah, Sarah Green is your partner on this.
Yes, she
your
is.
support. Council comments, questions for Megan?
Megan, just one. Do you have a program at 10 o'clock, or you just lay the wreaths at 10 o'clock on the 17th?
We have a program. So we have a little program we do. There's a little speaking part. We place an honorary wreath up on the front by, I think they call it the obelisk. That could be the wrong word. Up on the top right there in the cemetery, we put wreath stands up, and we have a veteran from each branch of the military or come and place an honorary wreath for their branch. I've got a bagpipe player that comes out and plays. Last year he played Amazing Grace, so it's kind of his choice what he wants to do. We have the ROTC's color guard that presents the colors for us, so it's a whole program, and then we lay the wreaths.
I'll be there.
Thank
right.
you. Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Carl. There we go. There we go. Thank you, Carl. Thank you. Very generous. Very generous. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move along on this. we have a large consent agenda with many final plats, and I'm happy that these final plats continue to come to the council for that final review. I think there's value in the staff finishing, crossing the T's and dotting the I's for a last set of review before they're recorded. So you're going to see a number of final plats on this. Additionally, council, you're going to see on this consent agenda, there are 4 recommendations for award of bid. Now, each of these are items that you approved in the budget, but if you would like to pull any of these bids from the consent agenda to have further discussion, I'm happy to see that. I want to make sure you feel comfortable in being able to give your input on that. On the other items, as is typical on consent agendas, clarifying comments, clarifying questions are most appropriate. So let me go through that list. Again, we did pull 4 items from that because the agreement was not in place and the bond was not in place that would be necessary. So item 5, consent agenda 5A is consideration to approve the minutes from the city council meeting of 10/26/22, consideration to approve the board audit report from October 2022, consideration to approve a final plat amendment to homesteads at Stuckey Farms, Phase 3, lots 56 and 57, located at 708 East and 686 East Prairie Way. Item 5D is consideration to approve a final plat for the Dennett East Industrial Phase 2 subdivision, located at approximately 1710 East, 1340 South. Item 5E is consideration to approve a final plat for the Red Waters at Sunrise Valley Phase 3 subdivision, located at approximately Country Way and Balancing Rock Drive. Skipping down to item 5I is consideration to approve a final plat for the Sunrise Valley Industrial Phase 2 subdivision, located at approximately Country Way and Smelter Drive. 5J, consideration to approve a final plat for the Sinister Estates Minor Subdivision, located at approximately 3930 South, 170 West. 5L is consideration to award the bid for the Main Street Substation 69 kV switching project to BODEC in the amount of $658,911.96. Item 5E or 5M is consideration to award the bid for the Cherokee Springs Water System Replacement Projects to Van Con Inc. in the amount of $1,219,222. 5N, consideration to award a bid for the street sweeper to Owen Equipment in the amount of $349,033. And lastly, 5O is consideration to award a bid for the storm water jet truck to Olympus Equipment in the amount of $489,960. And even removing 4 items, I think that might be a record on consent agenda. Council, I'm going to turn to you.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as you read it.
Councilman,
Oh, sorry. I didn't, go ahead.
no, I apologize.
remove my motion
I wasn't quick. So maybe just a comment, Mayor.
Please.
On the consent agenda, the consent agenda has grown like a winter wasteland, right? Me personally, just speaking for myself, when we are dealing with bids and money, I realize that we've approved this money, but a refresher wouldn't hurt just to make sure that the questions are answered. I would prefer in the future that bids are left off the consent agenda and voted on individually. I think that for me personally, I've done my research on these and I'm comfortable with them, but just in the future, that's my own personal preference, just for your consideration.
Thank you, Councilman. Are you asking to have them pulled and discussed tonight?
Only if the rest of the council is. Like I said, I've researched it and I feel comfortable myself right now, but in the future, it's something that just something for you to consider.
Duly noted. Thank you, Councilman. Any further thoughts, comments on the consent agenda? Okay, I'll call for a motion.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda as read by the mayor.
A motion by Councilman Coates. Second by Councilman Martinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 6, public hearings. We have 2 public hearings on this agenda tonight. By raise of hand, are any in the audience planning on speaking to either item on the public hearings tonight? Okay, seeing none, I will just make note that while the council is very aware of electronic public comment that is submitted, and they read and consider that, we did not receive any electronic public comment on either of these items either. So I will move to item 6A, which is a public hearing and consideration to approve a resolution amending the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year budget. Our finance director, Brian Brown, will give the report on that. After his report, I will open and close the public hearing and turn back to the council for further discussion and or motion. Brian.
Let me pull this up quick.
He's just building anticipation.
I haven't done this in a while. Last time Steve did it for me, so. Oh, there it is. All right, so this is Mayor and Council staff is proposing a budget amendment for the fiscal year 22-23. And if you'll, let me see, if you go to the next page. Oh, no. Right there. So the current budget is 120 million, and a budget amendment would put the budget at 121 million. And the purpose for this budget amendment includes pay increases, equity adjustments, and Christmas employee gift. And so that's what this adjustment would include. Do you have any questions for me regarding the budget amendment?
I may be really dumb, but can you tell me what an equity adjustment is?
Do you want to?
Yeah, unless Ruth wants to, I'm happy to explain it. Equity adjustment is basically if somebody's market range has changed throughout the year. So an adjustment for a position, the market has shifted either up or down in that position, then come January, we look at those and make those adjustments.
Do you want to maybe expand just a little bit on what what the city's doing as far as pay adjustments in terms of broadly across the board? I know that the council has approved that, or looking to approve it now, but we've had that discussion.
Or I can have Ruth explain that.
Yeah, Ruth, do you mind? I think it's good for those. It's good for people to hear that. Thank you, Ruth. It's good to see you. You know the routine.
Yes, so we have budgeted this year to go 7% across the board for all of our full-time employees. That has been approved in the budget, and so we've got the money to sustain that.
Can I ask what percentage increases we've had, like, say in the last
So
few
last
years?
year, if you recall, in August, you guys approved to do a 6% increase mid-year. And then we went to the traditional matrix, which is the range where based upon their performance, it's anywhere from the 3% to the 6%. And so that varied with each individual based upon how they performed throughout the year. So last year there was anywhere between 9% and a little above that based upon if they scored above their meeting expectation levels.
Ruth, can you talk to the council just a little bit about the challenge it is for cities to recruit and retain high quality employees, in this inflationary environment, and kind of some of the background on why staff recommended to council and council
Sure.
is budgeting this way?
It's been a really unique year just because of the economy in general. Just the recruiting is, we get good attracted in employees that will come knocking on the door, applicants, and yet what we're offering them, they're like, I can go to McDonald's and make that much, or I can go, just down the street to any fast food and make more than that. And so it's not been something that they want to make a commitment to us for if they can go make a couple of dollars more elsewhere. But that's with your youth, and I'm talking more on your community center employees where they're part-time students, and they're going to go for the biggest buck they can make. They could care less about their benefits, their retirement. That's not a thought in their mind at this point. And so, as we have these full-time positions, we've been really fortunate because we do our due diligence. We are competitive and stay up to where we are within our surrounding cities. We want to be, we're not looking at our northern cities because we don't have employee leaving to go up north, but our surrounding cities, southern Utah, we want to make sure that we're in that competitive pay range pool.
Not the top.
No, we're not at the top, and we don't expect to be at the top, but that's why we like to look at all of those ranges. There's reports that we can run, that we can look at to say, what's the trend in cities of our size? What's the trend of locals? And then we compare those to see how close those are, and then we like to be in the mid. We're not looking to be at the top end. We just want to be competitive.
Any other questions for our Human Resource Director? Thank you, Ruth. Okay, at this time, I will do the formality of opening the public hearing on item 6A. If anyone would like to come forward and speak to this budget amendment, please come forward now. Okay, seeing nobody come forward to speak to this item, I will close the public hearing and turn back to the council for further discussion, further question for staff, and/or a motion to approve the resolution to amend the budget. It also includes a little bit of a Christmas bonus for the employees, which we've done that for the last couple of years, which I think is important, but we wanted to make sure that we left that out of the original budget, as I understand, because we wanted to see where we were financially, if we could afford to do that. The numbers that Brian's ran, that Jeremy and Ruth have reviewed, show that we can afford to do that, and also that we can afford to move forward with these pay adjustments as an ongoing expense with the revenue that we have. We're not funding this with these pay adjustments with one-time monies. We have the ongoing funding to be able to sustain that, and that's really a credit to good management and good fiscal policy that this city has had. But I just see too much of a risk of not retaining high-quality employees if we don't keep up with the market.
So I agree with you. We need to keep up with the market. I just think markets are changing as well.
Yeah.
So I think I've talked to a few people, and I'm not saying we don't do it this time. I'm just saying it might come to an end real quick. We've had a lot of pay increases the last few years, but just depending on how things move forward, I want our employees to have the best life and the best pay that we can give them. But market is changing, and so I just don't want the expectations that I get 5% raise every year on top of my increase for my work too. I just want to note that we want to do everything we can for you, but but things are changing. So just be ready, I guess is what I'm saying, is as soon as we financially can't do it, then those kind of things are going to stop. I mean, I always want to make sure our employees are well taken care of, and it's gotten extremely hard with this housing market. So I definitely feel for them. I just want our staff to know we appreciate them, but things the next year might be different. It might not. I hope not, but it might not. So I just want to make sure that's on the record to know. And I'm happy we can do the Christmas thing this year.
Yeah.
But
Well, and Councilman, I think you were instrumental in initiating that.
I want the employees to feel gratitude for what they do for us, and they do for our town. They do a lot for us. They're on call. They deal with stuff that a lot of us don't see.
Yeah.
So I am appreciative that we can do this. So I'm happy we can do that. I'm super nervous going forward, just letting everyone know that we're going to look at the books. I'm going to look at the books extra hard next year to make sure we can keep doing what we're doing, because I don't want to get to a point where we don't have funds and all of a sudden we have issues. So that's my goal, is that I'm just letting the council know I'm feeling comfortable with this, but we need to really look next year and make sure our budgets are in line, so we don't, if we are seeing a change in the market, which I think we are, just hoping isn't as bad as it potentially has been in the past.
Well, and I would say we certainly don't wait for the next year either. I mean, we make adjustments mid-year if the market dictates it or staffing levels dictate that changes need to be made. And so I think everyone's well aware of that, and we appreciate that fact.
Thank you. Councilman?
Yeah, I want to add that I just hope our employees know how much they're appreciated. And I think we can stack up our employees with any employees anywhere. And I'm very, when this came through and I saw the Christmas bonus, I was very happy with that, because to me, that's, just a show of appreciation for our employees. So, and I'm glad we've talked about that we have the money. This city is very well run financially, and we appreciate that very much. I've been just nothing but impressed every time we talk about our finances, and I'm grateful that we're able to offer this to our employees. I agree with Councilman Coates, though. I think the economic times are changing a little bit, and we're going to be a little bit, it's a little bit unsure what's going to happen in the next year or so. So I'm really grateful that we can give this out this year, but I think, next year may be a little different. I don't know. I hope not, but we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. But I really appreciate our employees. They're the best. So.
Thank you, Councilman. For further thoughts from any other council members?
What could we say more? I agree with what's been said.
Okay, appreciate those comments, appreciate staff, all of your work on that. At this time, I'll call for a motion on item 6A to approve a resolution amending the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year budget to an amount of $121,736,708 as presented by our finance director.
Mayor, I'll make that motion that we approve the budget amendment for $1,041,051 for the pay increases.
A motion by Councilmember Coates.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Martinson. This is a resolution, so we'll go roll call. Coates.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Martinson.
Aye.
Casperson.
Aye.
Ivy.
Aye.
The budget amendment is approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Appreciate all the work. Hey, keep us in the black, okay? Make sure that we're okay on these things. Item 6B. This rivals the consent agenda in length. There's a public hearing and consideration to approve a resolution providing for the creation of PID 2022-01, Sienna Hills Public Infrastructure District Number 1, parentheses, the district, as an independent body, corporate and politic, authorizing and approving a governing document and interlocal agreement and a notice of boundary action delegating to certain officers of the city the authority to execute and approve the final terms and provision of the governing document, the interlocal agreement, the notice of boundary action, and any other documents related thereto, approving of an annexation area, authorizing the district to provide services relating to the financing and construction of public infrastructure within the annexation area, appointing a board of trustees of the district, authorizing other documents in connection therewith, and related matters. I'll breathe. I will tell you, for those watching or those here in attendance, the council acts as a redevelopment agency board, and we did have our board meeting thoroughly vetting this particular item prior to this meeting during our work session. So if you're wondering why maybe there's not a lot of discussion on such a lengthy item, it's because that's already taken place. But I will invite Rusty Hughes to come up. She's our Economic Development Director, to give a report on that before I open the public hearing, close it, and turn back to the council.
Thank you, Mayor. I will note that, well, this is probably the longest item number on here. State statute requires that we write it like that and that it be passed like that. So my apologies for that. And I will also note that in your packets, there is an outline of what this process looks like as far as a PID approval. This is a working group. There is a working group that reviews these documents in addition to the city council. And this was discussed in some degree at our previous meeting, but we do have our bond counsel for the city. This is our legal review. It's an independent legal review. So we have Aaron Wade on the line from Gilmore Bell. We also have our financial advisor, that's the city's financial advisor. We have Marcus Keller from Zion Public Finance. We also have some representatives from the development group that is seeking the PID. So we have Troy Anderson. He was at the previous meeting. He's with Clarity Design Group, and he's the master architect for the Auto Mall. He'll be working with each dealership as they come in, as well as the overall development. We also have Ted and Jared Wheeler, and I believe, yep, Justin Wayman is here as well. And then we also have Greg MacArthur with Sitla. So this is, Sitla's the landowner. The development agreement, they have a separate development agreement with Sitla, and then they also have one that was referenced, and a development agreement with the city. I do want to note that on that development agreement, it might look a little strange in your packet. It is a draft that has been signed by both Tri-State, which is the Auto Mall developer, and Sitla, and the final development agreement will be signed by all three parties. But we just wanted to make sure that the council knows that this agreement has already been signed off on the other party, so the council would be the last to sign off, and you'll re-sign a clean copy of that. That's been passed around a little bit, and I saw the margins got thrown off a little, so I apologize for that. Okay, I'll be pretty brief about this. What you're doing today is considering approval of a resolution to authorize the creation of a public infrastructure district. This one would be the Sienna Hills Public Infrastructure District number 1. We don't anticipate another public infrastructure district for this project, but we may have one in the Sienna Hills area in the future, so that's why it's number 1. And the primary purpose of the PID will be to finance the construction of public improvements within the Sienna Hills Auto Mall area, as outlined on the PID area map. One thing that I do want to note with this approval is that ultimate PID costs are paid for by the end user, meaning the landowners, the dealerships that will be that are planned for that auto mall. And PID financing is not a financial obligation of the creating entity, with the city council being the body that approves the creation of that, and the city being the creating entity or authorizing the creation of the public infrastructure district. So we won't have to have Brian come up and open a budget again or report on this. And because it's set up this way, as off the books of the city, there's no taxpayer obligation to this, and also the debt repayments and ongoing management associated with any public infrastructure district is within that district, so it operates as a separate body. If you have any questions, I do have our experts on board, and I will sit down unless you need me.
Oh, Rusty, I definitely do. You know me. So going through this is a $12 million PID ask, but I'm just fill me in on, but the estimate is 6 million. So where's the other 6 million slated for or allocated in the project?
Yeah, they typically do a 25 to 30% overage. There's a couple of reasons why they do that. One is the way that the bonds are sold on the market and how those are packaged. And I think that Marcus, our Zion Public Finance consultant, can maybe shed a little bit more light on that. We can also adjust that a little bit. We had some discussions about that because it was at 12, and I think we can adjust it down to 10 if you would prefer. The Auto Mall is already agreed that would be sufficient, but they don't want to go too low. It would hinder their ability to access the funding that they need. But Marcus, are you on the line?
So Rusty, while you're looking for him, I thought the total ask was like 5,619,000. That the maximum was 12, but the ask was 5,000,006. I don't think there was an ask above that, is there?
I think
I forgot it was 6.5.
6.5.
6.5.
Yeah, it was. I think it was transposed. It was 6.5. I believe.
So Rusty, I think Marcus is on the line. This is Mark Anderson. If he doesn't respond, I can answer that to a certain degree. Because interest rates are rising, the cost of capitalized interest, or interest that has to be deposited to make payments until the project's developed, has increased, as well as the funding of a debt service reserve fund has gone up, and give them more leeway for increased construction costs as well.
But doesn't the estimate, an updated estimate with the current inflation we've seen?
That's part of it, and then there's also the cost of capital that's rolled into that as well, which that varies quite a bit.
Explain that to me, Rusty, the cost of capital.
The cost to finance the project, so the interest rate can be put into that. You want to answer that, Mark?
Did I hear Marcus try and respond?
And can you all hear me? This is Aaron Wade.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so for some reason I could hear Marcus when he was speaking, but it seems like you guys weren't able. Marcus, do you want to try again to see if it comes through?
Yeah. Can anyone hear me?
There you go, Marcus. Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, perfect. It just wasn't my time, I suppose. So no, those are great questions. So let me try to answer and ease some of these concerns here. So there's a couple of things as discussed, the cost of capital. I think more importantly, just to point what's really driving this larger increase. And again, as Rusty said, I think the PID, I've talked to the underwriter just to kind of understand their reasoning behind it. They'd be willing to cut this back by about $2 million and still feel comfortable. The thing that's going to cause the biggest increases are the financial instruments that are associated with non-rated debt. Most of these are including the Debt Service Reserve Fund, which is quite substantial because these are non-rated bonds compared to what a city usually has with a rated bond and gets that waived. The other biggest thing that's actually a little bit of a moving target, so the City Council understands, is the capitalized interest. And the capitalized interest is going to continue to grow as interest rates go up. So that's going to be one of the biggest driving factors or largest things that the district's going to have to finance out of that 10 million authorization or 12 million authorization or whatever that final number ends up being. And that capitalized interest helps pay the interest on the bonds through the construction period of the project. And again, as rates go up, that's going to continue to get bigger until they actually sell the bonds and lock in those interest rates till that point. But I think the City Council does bring up a good point. We usually don't see a buffer this large on PID projects. But I feel like if they did want to cut this back down to closer to the $10 million range, that's probably more in line where we've seen other ones. And it seems like both the developer and their underwriter have said they'd be amenable to that change.
But is it standard for the PID to pay for the financing during construction of the loan? I thought that was their obligation to pay that fund during loan.
From the PIDs and the bonds that have been issued throughout Utah, capitalized interest is pretty standard in that process, because what's happening is they're trying to create that taxable value as they're building out their project. And so you'll kind of see it as part of their finance plan that there's very low taxable value in those first few years until they can, build the commercial project or the homes or whatever that may entail. In this case, the commercial project. And so until they kind of get more taxable value on the books and finish that, they really don't have a very good mechanism. And so they're trying to pay that down versus having that roll over and increase the actual size of the bond. So it's kind of the conservative way of doing it so that that bond doesn't balloon or there's any missed payments, I guess is the best way to say it. State law does require that they not do that for more than 3 years, though. So that's why the capitalized interest is capped at 3 years. And that's what it would be in this bond as well. But I'd imagine most want to start paying it sooner, because as soon as they can start making the payments outside of capitalized interest, then it starts going towards obviously the principal and the interest on the bond.
So they're borrowing 12 million, and then they're using a portion of that 12 million to pay their first bills for the first 3 years. And then hopefully by that time we have an auto dealership up and running, and they're generating tax revenue that would help pay the bond. But I'm just surprised we need 4 million to pay the first 3 years. I mean, I get a 20-30% budget, but that only gets you another $1 million. So you're at 6. How do we get to 4?
Well, I think in this case, if we pull it back down from 12 to 10, so we're looking at that, which is that where you're getting that $4 million number from?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we're on the same page there. So I think in this place, what they're looking at is not only financing the capitalized interest, which will take a substantial piece of that 4 million, but not all of it, but the debt service reserve fund, as well as any other credit type funds that they have to put aside that bondholders would require for credit worthiness in case the project is delayed or slow or something along those lines. So the idea is with those funds that they would eventually go back either when the bond's refinanced down the line or something around that point and actually go to downsize the bond. But from my talks with the underwriter and others involved in this, they're probably looking closer to the $9 million range. But at the end of the day, it's similar to how the city adopts parameters resolutions. We'd hate to be, or the PID would hate to be a few $1,000s or $100,000 or $200,000 off, and then all of a sudden have to start back from square one with the public hearing, all of these letters, and come back to the council for an additional $200,000 because they didn't give themselves enough of a buffer of authorization. So similar to the city's parameters resolutions, this is just an up to amount. It doesn't mean that they're going to take advantage of this full amount by any means. It just allows them to be able to do that if they need to. But more than likely, the market's going to dictate based off their mill levy and the studies that they have done when they go to the market, how much they're going to be able to afford and borrow, because the investor is not going to want to lose money on this transaction. So he's not going to loan them more than what he thinks is feasible for them to pay back with those 4 mills.
Marcus, great answer. Appreciate that. Ted and Jared Wheeler, I think, would like to jump in on that, potentially on that answer as well. You want to come forward and...
Thanks. Just a couple points. My name is Ted Wheeler. The 12 million that you're starting the math from is the maximum that the district could take, and we're not planning on taking that much money. We're trying to get the $9 million and netting out $6 million. So that's the first thing. And like he was saying, that could be cut back to $10 million, but we just don't want to have it too close. Any money that is taken from this bond is spent on this project. It's not going anywhere else, only on infrastructure for this project, nothing else. Public infrastructure, yeah. So we want to keep the bond amount as low as we can and have the fastest payback, because we kept the mill levy at 4 mills. We could have gone up to 15 mills, but at the very beginning, we said we only wanted a max of 4 mills. That kind of came back to bite us a little bit. That's why we came back today, because if we would have been flexible on that, we could have done that. But I didn't want to see a tax rate higher than that in this project. So I hope that answers a little bit of what you're.
No, I get you don't want to be short, right? Like I totally get that. It's just,
And we didn't set
it
that-
looks to be
that
over
number.
50%.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking the questions. And I wasn't aware that that's how PID's got the first 3 years paid a part of the loan, and then you still have to pay it back. But
Yeah.
I just wasn't aware of that. And so
It's
it's
a
just
fairly new thing. So, I mean, after this, number one, and number two comes, we'll all be a lot more educated on how they work. We didn't set the 12 million number. We didn't ask for that. We asked for what it took to build out the public infrastructure, and Zion's Public Finance, and they're the ones that structure the deal, and we can see how they structure it, and it's reasonable. And it does take pressure off of the project to have those payments made in that over the first 3 years. But by year 3, the revenue that comes in, I think that we could finish it off in less than 10 years. If there's other questions.
And maybe just clarify one thing. So the PID, the developer, the underwriter structures it, and then Zion's reviews it to make sure that we believe it's a fair and adequate type financing. So just to to make sure that that was clarified.
So who from the bank is on the board? Is there someone on the bank that's on the board, or? Because I was going through the board members, and I just don't know all these people. So it was a question I had. Is there someone other than the development group that's on the board, or is it just the
On which
development
board?
group? The board for the
Yeah,
PID?
the under state law, can you guys hear me? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, so under state law, the board needs to be comprised of property owners and their agents. So that's why we've got, Ted and Jared and Justin and others that are, the developer, because they're connected to the property owner entity. There is no banker on the board, and it would be very atypical to see a banker on the board. I think that would be likely a conflict for them, financing the project, but also sitting on the board. But
But there's a representative from Sitla on the board, correct? Okay.
that's correct. And in the governing document as well, something Sitla requested was, as long as Sitla owned property within the district, they would continuously have a seat on the board. So that was something that they requested.
I saw that. That's why I wanted to make sure. So.
Council, further questions for the applicant or the applicant's representatives or for staff?
I have a question for Council Segmiller. On page 10, and I don't know if you need to go to where I'm asking the question, but it says the district may also rely upon various other revenue sources, and they have the power to do penalties and charges and fees as provided in Utah code. And so I'm just wondering what fees, what penalties and charges do they have the power to assess?
Yeah. So to speak to that quickly, I would say that we've defined fees in the governing document in the definitions as fees for administrative services. So these aren't going to be fees for services or other things, but this would be I'm trying to think of a plausible service, but penalties is, tax penalties, right? If you fail to pay your taxes, then penalties and fees can get assessed on that. And then also, if the district is providing administrative services, it could charge a fee for that. For instance, if there was an assessment and they needed to foreclose, maybe there's a fee associated with that. But it's certainly not anticipated that fees are going to be a primary source here, other than just the delinquent property tax, fees and penalties.
And Councilwoman Casperson, that answer was provided by Aaron Wade, PID counsel. So he's an attorney that specializes in PIDs.
Okay. And so also the estimated cost of the district's organization initial operations are anticipated to be $100,000, which will be eligible for reimbursement from the debt proceeds. And does that come from, where's that debt coming from that's paying these the initial operation costs? Is that from the bond that you'll be using to pay those fees?
That's correct. That's correct. And so that's, this is an estimate. It's kind of hard to know exactly, but, there's a variety of things like it's got in there, the engineering services actually, figuring out where the infrastructure is going to go, mapping all of that out. The formation costs, the developer has agreed to pay costs the city incurs, including, like myself and Marcus in the creation, so that the city is held harmless, costs of their own counsel, all of those kinds of things. This is just a kind of a ballpark estimate of those costs, but they would be eligible for reimbursement, as you said, from the bonds that the district's anticipated to issue.
Really good questions. Additional questions for staff or the representatives?
Maybe it is an appropriate question. Hopefully it is. Monthly payment, just to give some context, what is the monthly payment? So that 3 years, just to give some, so we can do some quick math. What is a monthly repayment payment that will be capitalized for those initial 3 years?
And you're talking about for the bonds, not the property tax,
Correct.
right? Like the
bonds, correct.
Yeah, I'll let you jump in on that, Marcus.
Yeah, and I apologize. This is probably something I should have more handy there. I'm wondering if I talked to the district's or the PID's underwriter earlier today, and he'd said that he's planning to join this call as well. I'm wondering if there are underwriters available to answer that question. We could run a quick capitalized interest summation and kind of get you a ballpark figure on what that would look like. But really what you're doing is just taking those first 3 years of what their interest payment would be and borrowing that against the proceeds of the bond. And so that's how much it would increase by. But those numbers are not one that I have kind of right in front of me now. I need to probably dig for that. If you can give me a couple minutes, I might be able to come back to that.
Let me speak to that. This is Justin Wayman. Aaron, my understanding is we don't know exactly what that number would be because you don't know what your total infrastructure is going to cost yet. But that is a capitalized, it continues to pay that interest, and as it grows, as you do your development, as you do your infrastructure, you bring your lines out, you put your roads in, which are dedicated to the city. That makes what your payment is. So it will vary. It will be low, obviously, at first. As you start to make those payments, it will grow. And it'll capitalize out once you're done.
But you have an estimate that says what it's going to be. So you have a ballpark of what it's going to be.
Yeah, I think we know in the ballpark, and I'm not sure what that number is, but that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and I would just say, like's been said. So a couple of things I just want to point out. One would be, like Marcus said, so let's say your costs are $650,000 for the improvement costs. You're going to have some costs to pay the professionals in the transaction. You're also going to have a reserve, and that's usually around 10%. So let's assume to get $650,000, you need to borrow at least $700,000, and then a 10% reserve, $7 million is going to be another $700,000. So that's going to, put that around the $8 million mark, and then you include the interest on top of that, and that's why this is a little bit high. The thing I would just also remind is that state law and federal tax law limits what these proceeds can be spent on. So it's not as if the district could say they could get $12 million in the market, it's not as if they'd say, oh, we'll put $6.5 million towards our improvements, and then we're going to pay ourselves $2 million for being so good at doing a district. You know, the federal law is going to require that those improvements, that goes towards public improvements, roads, sewer. I know that the electronic sign has been a key thing for the city, those types of things, and that they couldn't use that on other uses. So they're going to be incentivized to be minimizing the amount they borrow to very closely target. I think what we've seen some issues over the last year, especially with inflation, is costs have jumped on some people. Interest rates have certainly been increasing. So I think it's just to make sure there's some headroom and some flexibility. But as was mentioned, I think people are comfortable with a lower number than 12 million if that's what the council would like to pursue.
Yeah, and by the way, so it looks like Brennan is online, but it says he's can't participate, or maybe he's not authorized to participate at this point. But so just doing some quick math on this, just kind of throwing in some ballpark rates there. We're showing between probably about 1.5 to 2 million, depending on how the bond's structured, of potential capitalized expenditures. So you could see how that could, increase on top of the 6 million of proceeds they're trying to get. And that doesn't include the debt service reserve fund or anything else. So that's kind of again, very, very ballpark, very general. But again, I think that's what we're trying to avoid is, underestimating this. And then again, interest rates running away from us again, and that number going up even further without, and then having to come back to the council here again for additional permissions is I think the hope that the PID is trying to avoid. But I would honestly, as I've talked to Jeremy and Rusty and Aaron about this, if it may not give the council much more comfort, but if bringing down the limit from that 12 to 10 million range, even though I feel strongly that the market's going to dictate that they actually can't borrow more, even if they wanted to, that may actually be a wise move from the council, and then it may kind of be a good middle of the road path to avoid potential future complications if that was something of concern.
And council, Marcus and Aaron both are whom are advisors to the city on PIDs. And so when he advises you, he has been retained. He's had a role with us of advice about this PID and others.
Yeah.
So that the debt service reserve, what is that percentage?
Usually it's has a 3-pronged test, but in this case, I think most of the time they run it at 125% of the max annual payment. So you're probably looking roughly between $500,000 and $600,000 for that debt service reserve fund. But again, that's money that's going to be set away. So that's not necessarily being spent unless the bond, for whatever reason, defaults. Then the creditors would have access to make that, a portion of that or all of that go towards the payment. But the hope is that this is a very successful PID in development. So when the bond's refunded, that money will actually go towards downsizing the bond once it's more credit worthy and investors are a little bit more confident. Kind of once it gets past what we call kind of dirt bond phase and the infrastructure's in place.
And I'll just add too, just a reminder, I know we went over PID, it was in June. So it is a tax only within that boundary. So only within the parcels that are within that boundary, and it's a self-tax. So it's an ad valorem, it will show up on the property tax, an additional tax. So the landowners are agreeing to incur that additional tax so that they can finish the infrastructure, get the infrastructure in first, and then that's part of the strategy to bring the dealerships quicker as well when they have pad-ready sites as opposed to raw ground.
So how are the future property owners made aware of this PID?
As they purchase in, and as that changes, the board also can change. So it's
When they first purchase the property, how are they made aware that there is an additional tax that's outside of a normal.
So initially they have to sign off as on a petition. So all landowners have to sign the petition. In this case, it started with Sitla, and then Finley Hyundai also signed and they agreed to that. And that occurs also when they purchase a parcel. That's part of the state law requires that a special document and this is why we hesitate with residential PIDs. That should give you pause because it's sometimes a less sophisticated investor, whereas with a dealership, they know what they're getting into and they have to sign off onto that and agree with that. And Ted was mentioning that mill levy rate. They set that mill levy rate in the beginning when the market was different. It shifted just between then and now, and they really wanted to hold that same mill levy rate and not increase it because that's what they committed to with the first dealership. So that's another reason why they're asking for for this amount or authorization for this amount, not that they will borrow that amount.
And could I jump in just also to add to what Rusty said? Rusty's right. We've got the consents of the property owners, but additionally, there's several documents that actually get recorded on the property. So a notice of the existence of the district is, and the plat of the district gets recorded on the property. But separately, your governing document that's before you would require them to record a notice that's just very simple, straightforward, one page. And it says in bold letters, it says under the maximum property tax rate of the district, for every $100,000 of taxable value, there would be an additional annual property tax of $400 for the duration of the district's bonds. So that's recorded in a very simple one-page document that a title report's going to show and is going to be pulled. The initial purchasers are going to receive a separate disclosure that contains the same language as part of their packet. And then I think the other item that I would just mention is the real estate disclosures in the state of Utah have been updated in the last year or two to now a seller disclosure has to disclose whether or not a property is within a public infrastructure district and whether or not that public infrastructure district has issued limited tax bonds. So there's several layers here. They're not going to be perfect, but I think for sophisticated bodies, like's been mentioned, commercial groups, auto dealers, certainly they're going to be asking for title reports and reviewing those. And it's going to be abundantly clear on that title report that they're within a district and subject to an additional property tax.
And Councilman, it's generally accepted that recordation of a document against a property is sufficient legal notice for all future or subsequent owners.
This is kind of a new concept for a lot of us PIDs. And I think you can tell by our questions that we don't want any unsuspected, information to come about after the fact. So, I often listen to these conversations and wonder how our residents are listening to them at home. I think it's important that we just take just 1 second and just say, PIDs are to get big projects off the ground so that we can start generating some sales tax revenue from those projects. And it's important to also know that it's paid by the end user. There's no liability to the city. And my personal opinion is, as far as the 12 million or 10 million, I would hate to hamstring the project by giving some some lesser funds what they want. It doesn't really matter to me. I think that the provisions are in place to make that secure regardless. But the last comment I want to make is that this project makes sense. We're going to have a lot of people come forward with PIDs that want PIDs that won't make sense, from in my mind, but this one does. And that's why I've really, like you have, worked hard to understand this, because it's a different concept, right, than what you're raised with. When you get your loans, you go do your project and you pay it off, and that's the way it's done. But that's not the case here, and that's why I think it's taken a minute for the council to try to to absorb all this, because it's kind of a new concept, something that we feel great responsibility with. And I appreciate everyone's efforts. Rusty, you're kind of in a hard position there to answer them all, but I think it's important that we remember that there's citizens listening at home as well while we're doing this, so that they understand what we're doing for their interests. So.
And Councilman, it's because some of our advisors are just chiming in via telephone or audio, hopefully it's evident to the citizens that the gravity of this project, the city's reached out and we have specific folks who are experts in the field of PIDs, and they're advising us as we go, as well as, the applicants have their attorney here and they've got advice on their side as well. And so with that said, the council still has discretion.
I think I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Just to kind of piggyback on what Councilman Ivy said, it's important for the residents to, remember, and for us to remember, that this is a good way to get a great project off the ground, to finance it, and to get some revenue coming into the city to pay for our police officers, our fire department, and all of those things that we need to pay for. And we've had such a large amount of residential growth, explosive, in the last 10 years, and we haven't had a lot of commercial growth. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for our city to have a wonderful development and to bring in much needed tax dollars that pays for our basic services here in this city. So
I wanted to note just a couple of things. Our Aaron Wade and Marcus Keller both plan to be here in person to speak to council. The snowstorm prevented them from coming down. And I also want to note that Troy Anderson is from out of state. He flew in. He's the master architect for the Auto Mall. He'll be with us along the way. He also brought some materials because at preliminary plat there was some confusion and some technical questions that maybe were best answered by him. So he is available to answer any questions about that maybe after this.
Thank you, Rusty. Jeremy.
I'll try to keep my comments brief, but it's kind of an interesting night. This is a fairly new tool that the legislature has opened up, and it's interesting because there are a lot of developers, like Councilman Ivy said, that are interested in using this tool. The city started probably a year and a half ago with a PID policy so that we could structure what we were looking for in our city. And we spent quite a bit of time, those of you who were here, if you remember, making sure that when PIDs came forward, they met the policy. And this PID does meet our policy. They're also really complicated. And I like the fact that we're trying to become as expert as we can in PID policy, but it's extremely complicated. I guess I would just like, for the record, to hear from Aaron and Marcus if there are anything in either the legal documents or the financial side of this that cause you any concern or give you any pause from the city side.
Aaron, I'll let you go first on the legal side if you want.
Sure. No, I think we've gone through carefully with the city, with staff, to make sure that the interests of the city are protected. I would say, especially for a commercial project, the 4 mills is a low rate compared to what we've seen in other communities on commercial development. So I think that assures that, future property owners won't be overly burdened by this tax. A few other things to point out as well is there's safety built in. If everyone here is hoping that this project goes as well as can be imagined, but if we hit an economic downturn like's been discussed in this meeting today, if issues pop up, there's protections in place that there's an expiration to this tax, so that the property won't perpetually be burdened if it falls behind on its payments. There's an expiration to make sure that you don't just have a dead zone in the city because nobody wants to deal with a tax that will never end. I think that like I said, the mill rate's reasonable. I think the disclosures are thorough to make sure that everyone's aware. And I think that we've, properly limited what the expenditures can be made for. So I don't have any concerns. I think we've vetted all the concerns as we've gone through this process over the last several months. And I'm comfortable with the document that's in front of the city council tonight.
On the financial side, almost to echo Aaron, the thing that we really look at when we're analyzing these, one, is it commercial or residential? That plays a huge difference between how you look at a PID. with this being a commercial PID, in essence, they're wanting to tax themselves to create another revenue source to be able to bond for public infrastructure. Then we look at the mill levy. Does it seem excessive? Does it seem like, because you can really tell a good developer from a bad developer, because typically sometimes a developer will ask for all of it and realize after the fact that they can't sell it, or they've asked for too much, or it just wasn't feasible. In this case, with being a conservative mill levy and everything in place, as well as looking at the markets and kind of their analysis as to, it seems to be very well thought out. Obviously, they couldn't have predicted that interest rates were going to skyrocket over the past 6 months to a year, but I don't think anyone was really prepared for that phenomenon. But other than that, it seems like they've done a good job, at least with trying to make a conservative view and not over leverage themselves with the PID.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Aaron. Further thoughts, further comments for staff or council? Thank you, Rusty. This is a public hearing in regards to a resolution creating a public infrastructure district. If anyone would like to come forward and speak to this item, I'll open the public hearing now. Please, Councilman MacArthur.
Hi, my name is Greg MacArthur. I just wanted to come speak as a representative of the landowner. So Sitla still is the landowner. This is our development partner for the land. There's a couple things that we like that they've done on this PID. The first would be that and probably the biggest, as the landowner, we want to make sure that this land over time will sell. And if you burden it too much, so if we bring a mill levy in that's too high, the end users that would come in, the dealerships or whatever commercial use would come in there, plan on being dealerships, they're going to absolutely see what that mill levy is, and they're going to take that in consideration as they come and buy the lands. And so if that's too high, that would dissuade them from coming. One thing that we really like that they have done is things have changed significantly since they first came in and said, yeah, we'd like to do the 4 mills. And the 4 mills at the time made it so everything penciled really well. But now, because the bond rates have completely changed, that 4 mills didn't get them to the level where they thought they would have been back then. But they elected not to change that. From what we've done our research as the landowner, and we've seen that you can go up to about 6 mill levies before the land becomes to the point where people go, oh, well, there's that burden there. Well, we're going to have to come for a lot lower price. We're going to have to look at different options. But keeping it that 4 is significantly under what that is, and it keeps them in the right range. So we're really happy about that. But we think it's a good project. As the landowner, we're in support of it. I just wanted to come and make those comments. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Council, you've heard from staff, you've heard from the experts, you've heard from the applicant. This is your time to discuss and or make a motion on this PID.
Mayor, I'd just like to hear our city staff. I've heard them speak to it, but I haven't heard them, say they're for it, like our council and our city manager. I mean, these are things that, again, this is new to us, but it would be important to me what their recommendation is as well.
Yes, Jeremy, go ahead, and then Thad.
Well, I'll start. When I say it's a little bit historic that we're doing this, I want it to be good history, not bad history. I don't want us to sit here 5 years from now and say, well, those were the guys who did that, or the council who did that.
That's a great way to start this. I'll tell you. I'm excited now.
But I think a lot of effort, a lot of thought and careful consideration have been put into this. And I have no reservations with the project. I echo what Councilman Henderson said. It's important for our future to be able to not have to do tax increases to our residents, to have the sales tax come in that helps pay for the services that they need. So this is a project that's taken a while to get here, but I'm in favor of the project and the PID.
Thank you, Manager. Legal counsel, you've been asked for your opinion. I'm not sure if this is a legal opinion or just your opinion.
Yeah, the legal opinions have come from Mr. Wade in his role as PID specialist and counsel, but I've been involved you know, I don't know if it was Marcus or Aaron, but they referenced the months that we've worked on this. And this has really been something that's been worked over the course of several months. And it's my opinion that we've had good advisors, and the advisors have expected important details out of the applicant, and the applicants have complied with those expectations. And I would just, you know, parrot their recommendations.
Thank you. Ted, would you
A good
mind?
way of not answering the question too.
He's an attorney. What do you expect? Come on.
I think that's what they learn at law school. Jared, I want to ask you a question here.
Please. Thank you.
There's been some discussion from the council about that, the parameters. Namely, does the council look to approve this at 12 million or 10 million? Please share your thoughts about that with this group, this decision-making body.
Just like the legal counsel gave you, we can't use any more proceeds than what's public infrastructure, right? So if you guys feel more comfortable at putting it at 10 than 12, it doesn't, the one thing I don't want to do is have to come back like they were saying, but I don't believe that'll be the case, right? We're not going to be able to draw more money than that to do it. And, you know, I was hearing you guys think and talk about it, and I think it's important that you guys know where we're coming from as the developers. And this has been such a interesting and fun project for us because it's so new working with SITLA. But from a developing standpoint, it would be a lot better. And what we'd rather do is just buy the land, put the infrastructure in ourselves, and we improved our land and it's worth more money, right? The biggest kicker is we don't have that luxury. We're not allowed to buy it until we approve the dealers that we're bringing in for you. And we've put a lot of sweat, our whole team, and we're men of our words. We've promised that 4 mills to the Finleys, and we're not going to go back on that. That's why this whole thing is coming about. But yeah, I know that our group would have rather just owned the land and spent the $6 million, which would be no problem as long as we retained ownership. Right now, how it is, we spend the $6 million, and if something happens and SITLA pulls the contract, in our contractual agreement, we don't get reimbursed for our infrastructure. So it's just a risk to us. This public infrastructure district allows everybody to mitigate the risk and allows us to move as quickly as possible. The only other alternative is to build each section and segment as we buy and take down and sell the land, which is going to be more costly and just choppy and ugly. And we really believe in the beauty of this project that Troy's designed, and that this is really the best tool. And I know it is new. It's new for us, first one we've done too, but I believe that we'll see a lot of these. We're going to utilize them, hopefully with the land we own instead of but yeah, I really believe this is a good tool to help cities grow and to help developing.
Council, any questions for Jared? I'd like to give Troy Anderson an opportunity to speak too.
Thank you.
I just want a clarification. Can I have a clarification before
Yeah.
you sit down? So you said that this money has to be used for public infrastructure. But then we heard from, I don't know which attorney.
Aaron Wade.
Yeah, he said that some of the money will be used for also administrative costs too.
You mean the fee? So there's a cost of the bond issuance, right? And so they set that aside and it gets paid for it. So it's like the admin fee. It's like if you went to set up a loan and the bank charged an admin fee or the underwriter charged an admin fee. Is that what you're asking about?
The different fees.
Aaron, are you there? You can probably touch
Yeah,
on
and Marcus could jump in as well. I would just note that that's pretty commonplace, regardless of who is the issuer. So if the district's issuing, they're going to have to pay the costs associated with issuance. If the city, when the city borrowed money, say you need a new fire station, you're going to have to pay the professionals involved in the issuance of that debt as well. I think the one additional layer here is that the district, because it's new, is also going to pay costs associated with its creation, and that's an okay cost under statute and those sorts of items. But those are kind of one time, let's get this thing formed and then be able to move forward. But yes, just to say again that the cost associated with the bonds is typical for any financing across the state.
So council member, maybe a good analogy, impact fee funds are limited in how we can use them, But we can use them to hire the architects and engineers that plan the impact fee eligible project, for example. And that's the same type of expenses that can be covered by the PID.
But part of this expense isn't just the infrastructure and the dirt. The sign is still part of that, 1.2 million for that. So, but that's part of that development cost, whether it's in the ground or what it is. So
That's correct.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
First, I'd like to note how I appreciate the thoroughness of the council. It's a big task you're taking on. It's a great project. I've worked as an architect for 25 years, primarily with developers. So my job is to make their projects successful. And whether you're doing retail development or in this case, an auto mall, first of all, it's about location, obviously. You've got a tremendous location. You've got all the access we need. We've got visibility. Next is, do you have the income to support it? Do you have the numbers? We've done lots of market studies to ensure that's the case. And those all stand to buoy up what we're talking about. And then secondly is the overall design of the project. Just to come in and take that piece of 40 acres and make it flow in a manner that'll be conducive to any car dealership wanting to be there because they have the accessibility, they have the visibility, and to be able to make a beautiful place that'll draw them in is so critical to this project. So yeah, we've been working on it for 2.5 years. The video that's on the current website was actually done 2.5 years ago. So we've been probably working on about 3 years now. So some of those costs that have been invested and all the time and the effort that the Wheelers and their group have gone through, only now, 3 years later, we're actually talking about the PID. They've been going on good faith and grit, I think, for 3 years to make this happen. And ultimately, as it's been brought up several times, in the interest of the cities, we talk about Christmas bonuses. That's what pays for it, is bringing in these dealerships, bringing in more income, bringing in more tax increment to your city. And I think this is going to be something that you as a board, as a council, can all be proud to be a part of, because you helped establish that. You helped bring it here. Yeah, it takes a little bit of trust. It takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of work. But I know this will be a successful project, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And if there's anything I can answer about the technicality of the development itself, I'd be happy to do so.
Council. Thank you. We appreciate you, Troy. Further conversation, council. Are you feeling okay with the 12? Are you feeling?
I'm feeling rushed, just so you know.
Okay.
Just putting it out there, but it's more in the fact that we've talked about it, but not. Now we're here, and all of a sudden it was like, well, here's all the details, and we get 3 days to review it. That's how I feel. But
well, that's fair, Councilman.
Yeah, I'm actually feeling okay with the 12, and I'll tell you why. That's why I asked the questions I did. Just did some quick math on the 5.6 million, right? Because that's what the infrastructure is being requested, at the very bottom of the page. They talked about anywhere from a 10 to 30% potential for overage, right? We know that could potentially happen. That's a $1.7 million. That gets us to 7.3 million. The reason I asked about the interest capitalization was so I could add that to that number. They said 1.5 to 2 million. If we take worst case scenario and take it to 2 million, we're at 9.3. Then I asked about the capital reserve. They said worst case is 600,000. That puts us at 9.9 million. What happens if interest rates go up? That debt service goes up. That interest capitalization goes up. They'll be back in front of us asking for additional bond issuance if necessary. So that's why I feel comfortable with the 12 after reviewing all of the documents and everything that's been presented tonight.
And that
I'm
makes
glad we
that
have an
makes sense.
MBA on this council.
No, I appreciate you breaking it down like that. And like I said, with 10 or 12, we're not paying the loan back, so it's not like I just wanted to make sure we were clear when in our packet, we only get shown that they need 6 million and our ask is 12. It's kind of like raises eyebrows. Why do you need 50% more money? But when it's broken down like that, so future PIDs, please include breakdowns like that. So
that would be the request. In addition to that last exhibit for anybody that's going to be requesting a future PID, if they're watching, listening, if they're here in the audience, just include that on the exhibit so that we have that, so that we're not caught with an additional $6 million request.
So I've always been for PIDs. I think they're a good way to get stuff off the ground. And maybe I just need to get it's my gut telling me slow down, but if the rest of the council's ready, I mean, I'm not opposed to moving forward if this makes sense, but my gut's just telling me it got rushed, in my opinion. Not rushed because it's been 3 years we've been going through this process, but we finally have the details. But I probably should just relax because we have legal counsel that have been vetting this stuff for months, and I just haven't been there. So that's the difference, I guess.
I think it is, and I think it's important to recognize that. I guess if we knew that you wanted to be involved at a detailed level from the beginning, we can start doing that when the PIDs come through. But we've had our bond counsel and our financial advisor have been working on this for months and months. But I get that you've only been able to read through the documents for a few days.
And I'm always an open book, so I'll just tell everyone. My day-to-day job is engineering and that kind of work, and so the other stuff in council come easy to me. But this stuff is it's part of this, but it's a new tool that I've never dove into, so I've struggled with it. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the best way? But I've always struggled with PIDs, but I think it's a tool that they can use to help them help us. So why don't we do it? So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I just want to make sure that you've got lots of parties looking. You got SIT looking as a landowner. You have the developer looking as a developer. We have there's a board now that's a part of it. Like I said, I'm just talking out loud, trying to get myself good with this, but I want it to be a success. And the reason why I've liked PIDs is let's get that infrastructure in, get the majority of it in now, use today's dollars versus tomorrow's dollars, because it's not getting any better. And then you can buy it, and it actually reduces the cost on that property owner in the future to build that infrastructure. And you're not getting a piecemeal. My perfect example is Washington Fields Road. Drives me nuts. Every day I drive down it, and it's just development, and it's been pieced together for 20 years. And it's just because of how it is. I get it because it's not one developer, but I don't like the feel and look of that road. I think we can do better, and this is a step and a tool to do that. Is get it in now, use today's dollars, and move forward. So that's my spill, I guess.
Well, Councilman, I think that personally, I don't want to feel like council ever needs to be rushed. If you need more time or something, then just so council knows I'm feeling comfortable with it. Like I said, it was a big pill for me to swallow. It's just a concept that I'd never considered. My parents were married during the Depression, so that'll help you understand how I was raised. But Councilman, can you give an idea of what you'd like to do if you're not ready for a motion? We'd like to.
I don't know how that affects. The other problem I have is I'd hate to hold these great group off for a month because our next meeting's a month away. But I don't know what 2 weeks or a month will do for me either. Sometimes you got to take the risk and just jump in. So
yeah, this will always be this council's and this city's first PID, right? And I think that's part of what we're acknowledging here tonight. It's a first. It's a first. My perspective on staff is I'm glad that it's finally here. I feel like it's taken a long time. There's times when the applicant's known that we feel like it's taken a long time. And so from the staff perspective, we had times when we planned that it would have come before you much sooner than this. And so the feeling of rush isn't reflected on this side, but it's still our first PID. It always will be.
I think we're all just feeling what a lot of the citizens feel when I appreciate that you mentioned that we've discussed this in a workshop. This has been discussed, and I think we're all feeling a lot of that, of what our citizens feel when they ask, well, why was there not a lot of discussion on that item and you just approved it? well, because we've discussed beforehand, and there's been a lot of workshopping going into all of these things. So appreciate feeling that way, because now we can empathize with citizens.
But we have great staff and they've vetted it pretty hard. So, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in PIDs, and I don't know if our staff is. They might be now, but we'll find out, right?
They weren't, if they weren't before.
We just hire the PID experts.
Well, you hire the people that were appropriate and got great counsel. So,
Yeah. You know, and we remember, obviously, Marcus, because of the weather, wasn't able to come here, but we've seen Marcus for the last few years with Zion Public Finance, and we would recognize him. And, you know, he was the expert behind the creation of our policy. So I think it's fitting that, you know, he's reviewed the documents, and, you know, there's a lot of detail that goes into this, and I'm confident that you know, Rusty has gone through this process the right way. But council, I'm happy to entertain a motion. I'm happy to hear more conversation. I think it's the mayor's job a little bit to prod things along, even if it's not comfortable. If I'm the one next in line on the diving board, I might just be, you know, pushing you to jump a little bit.
Mayor. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'll make a motion that we approve the PID 2022-01 for the Scenic Hills Public Infrastructure District Number 1. I'm fine with the 12 million. I don't think that matters based on Councilman Martinson proposed. So it's my motion.
Excellent. Appreciate that. We have a motion.
I'll second that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Wherever you say, Mike, go ahead. I'll second that, Mayor.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilmember Coates. We have a second by Councilmember Ivy. We'll go roll call vote. Henderson.
Aye.
Martinson.
Aye.
Casperson.
Nay.
Ivy.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
The PID is approved 4-1. Congratulations. We wish you all the success in the world, and you know, this is going to be fun. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. How we doing, council? Are we okay, or do we need to take a little break, or are we okay?
But from that, I mean,
Let's take a break.
Let's take 5.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes.
My brother always buys cars with cash, and he's been trying to find one, but they're like 60K. I'm like, dear goodness, how are you doing that?
Yeah, ours is too big.
All right, it's been 5 minutes. We'll look to get restarted again.
Boy, that was a good comment you made. Because I was like, why are we going from 6 to 12? But that makes absolute perfect.
Okay, we'll continue on with item 7, preliminary plat. Item 7A is consideration to approve a preliminary plat for Corral Hollow, located at approximately Lost Creek Drive and Corral Hollow Drive. The applicant is D.R. Horton. City Planner Eldon Gibb will give the report on this particular item.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. On October 26, 2022, City Council tabled this item to November 9th, 2022, due to the applicant's request, and the applicant is now ready to move forward. The applicant is requesting approval of preliminary plat at Corral Hollow at Long Valley subdivision. This particular subdivision is proposing 188 single-family lots covering an area of 41 acres. The lot size will range from approximately 4,000 square feet up to 7,400 square feet in size. The zoning designation at this location is planned community development. The surrounding zoning is planned community development to the north, south, east, and west. The proposed subdivision conforms to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements and other city ordinances as it relates to this location. Staff has reviewed the request and recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plat as outlined. The Planning Commission reviewed this request on October 19th, 2022 and recommended approval of the preliminary plat for Corral Hollow at Long Valley subdivision based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Council, questions for City Planner before we invite the applicant forward, or for any staff for that matter? Thank you, Eldon. Would the applicant like to come forward on this? We know you, but if you just state your name for the record, Don.
Don Bean with D.R. Horton. This is just our latest single-family detached lots, and we're hoping to get approval for this. I don't think there's anything major or different from previous ones, but happy to answer any question you have.
Council, questions for the applicant?
This is maybe unrelated to this, but how is your sewer pump coming?
I was there yesterday. They were putting the garage door on and connecting the last piece that would connect the 3 pumps together.
So you're just about there then?
Yeah, it's really close.
Good.
A lot of asphalt, ready to go vertical, aren't you?
We've started going vertical on the
On some sections, yes.
some of the single family and some of the townhomes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we're excited.
What's your, I mean, we've done a lot of lots here in the recently. Is there like, are you just gonna finish out the project, or are you gonna stop and build for a little bit? Now
We'll probably stop and build for a little bit, so we don't have too much in the ground, but we already have hundreds in the ground.
I know we've approved a lot, so I just wanted to and I knew we were working on the lift station. I was just curious if we're gonna see a slowdown on plats and more on
We'll
building
probably see a slowdown
permits.
on plats.
Okay.
Thank you, Don. Don't go too far. You're up next again. Council, this is your opportunity to discuss or make a motion on this particular item.
How long do they have to, once something is approved, how long do they have to, does it ever expire, that approval, or at what point does it?
No, once a plat's recorded, I mean, they have 12 months to get it recorded. Or wait a minute, we're on a preliminary plat. Let me back up. They have 12 months to bring a final plat to you.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry, I'm already thinking way ahead. They have to bring a final plat within 12 months or it expires. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, they have
Well, it took me a long way to get there, but that's what it is.
But some extenuating circumstances, right?
Yeah, you can get extensions. The council's allowed myself to give a 6-month extension. If they need more than that, they have to come to you for another, but we don't give them any more than 12 total. So they have up to 2 years to get a final plat, and that's a pretty long time actually when you're dealing with subdivision plats. So
I'll be happy to entertain a motion unless there's further discussion.
Mayor, I can make a motion to approve a preliminary plat for Corral Hollow located at approximately Lost Creek Drive and Corral Hollow Drive.
I have a motion by Councilmember Ivy,
Second.
second by Councilmember Casperson. We'll go roll call on this. I think we're on Martinson,
Aye.
Casperson,
Aye.
Ivy,
Aye.
Coates,
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
The preliminary plat is approved unanimously on item 7A. 7B, consideration to approve a preliminary plat for Hoodoo Hollow at Long Valley, located at Lost Spring Drive and Riggs Loop Drive. Applicant, again, is D.R. Horton, and City Planner Eldon Gibb will give the council a report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item was also tabled from October 26th to today's date due to the applicant's request to incorporate workforce housing into this subdivision. The workforce housing will be located in the Hoodoo Hollow subdivision. The applicant is proposing to utilize private sector funding in the amount of $10,000 that will be allocated to each home purchase in this subdivision. The applicant has identified that the private sector funding will be made available, but not limited to public safety workers, teachers, emergency service personnel, healthcare workers, and other public employees collectively, such as the public employees. The applicant has identified that the private sector funding is meant to be applied towards the payment of the following fees and/or cost to the extent applicable in the following order, such as temporary buy downs, origination charges, origination fees, processing fees, upfront, unfinanced mortgage, insurance, and discount points if applicable, as allowed by the public employers, employees, lender. Any unused incentive will be forfeited and may not be applied toward the purchase price of the home or otherwise dispersed to the public employee. The Hoodoo Hollow at Long Valley subdivision is aimed towards satisfying or styling with affordability. The applicant has made it known that the intent of this development is to develop high-quality residential units with less expensive standard features that truly provide these workers homes of value. Staff believes this wording satisfies the workforce housing requirements, but would like further clarification in regards to how much of a savings these less expensive features are going to equate to, and would like specific examples for how this will be carried out. And I'm gonna circle back to that after I'm done with my report, kind of clear up some concerns there. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the Hoodoo Hollow at Long Valley subdivision, which is proposing 107 townhome pad sites and 3 larger lots, which will consist of future multifamily and designated land for a church. The townhomes consist of 10.65 acres, and the future development, the 3 lots include 17.29 acres for a total of 27.94 acres. The zoning designation at this location is planned community development. The surrounding zoning is planned community development to the north, south, east, and west. The proposed subdivision conforms to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements and other city ordinances as it relates to this location. Staff has reviewed the request and recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plat as outlined. The Planning Commission reviewed this request on October 5th, 2022, and unanimously recommended approval of the preliminary plat for the Hoodoo Hollow at Long Valley subdivision based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions as seen in your report. And to circle back to wanting clarification on as to how this will be carried out, I met with the applicant today and learned that the way that they are able to buy the materials is in bulk. So this subdivision is going to be very similar to Labyrinth Point, which has already been platted out. And the finishes are going to be the same. So the way that they're saving money for the workforce housing is the $10,000 in funds that are going to go towards the down payment. And then they're also going to be providing blinds throughout the house and a fridge and a washer and dryer for that. And that's not mentioned in my report. If council feels that's appropriate, we would just ask that you add that as a condition.
How do we hold them to that condition, Eldon? How does that, like, I just don't know. I've never dealt with one of these. How do you hold that to a condition on a building permit? Maybe it's a.
So this is more than just a building permit. The PCD agreement that was approved for Long Valley Trails includes a requirement of provision of workforce housing. And there's a lot more work put into this than is evident tonight. One of the definitions is how do we define workforce housing and how do we make it a realistic, but also a market-based product. And so the applicants worked really hard and produced a lot of details that Eldon just went through. And so your first enforcement relates back to their PCD agreement and their development agreement and the approval of that by this council. And then the second would be, again, tonight's presentation is to satisfy that requirement of the PCD. So then the second step would be, is what is approved in satisfaction of the PCD agreement provision fully complied with as presented or as approved?
So a public employee or, somebody that meets the requirements can come in and be gifted closing costs and, maybe up to $10,000 in closing costs plus partial down payment or just whatever, up to $10,000 in. Okay. I like that idea.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
Let's say, and they're going to be awarded, that's the other thing we asked them, they brought back to us, each one of those will get that washer and refrigerator and dryer as part of that package and the blind covering. So that's what they're doing. To tag on to what, Council Sigmiller was saying, they're going to come back with a PCD amendment on a few things. And we wanted to bring this to the council tonight to see if this is acceptable to you. And part of that amendment, we're going to put that in there. That will be specifically stated in that new PCD that you'll have a chance to vote on in that amendment. So that I hope that helps kind of answer your question, Councilman Coates.
Councilman Henderson, the other detail is what they have described as value styling, which is not a lesser product, but it'll be built and styled in a way that it'll have a better market price. And that'll be up to the applicant to determine how to do that. But yeah, their commitment is that there would be value styling on units so that they're more affordable at the time of purchase.
I think, just thinking about it, that's a pretty good approach because part of the problem for first-time home buyers, at least in my experience, has been coming up with that initial closing costs or whatever in the beginning. So I think that's a pretty good approach to workforce housing. So
I think it's interesting also that the two items they mentioned were blinds and washer and dryer, which are kind of the last things that you're going to think about when you buy a new home that you may not be able to afford.
Surprised you guys have your blinds done. I still don't have them all the way done.
Sheets work fine too.
My first house, I had newspaper up in the windows till I could afford.
Further questions for staff?
I guess I just have a question about, I'm not real familiar with this workforce housing requirement. How do we know it meets the criteria?
So it's a good question, Councilman. And a lot of time was spent mostly between attorneys, but also between Eldon and his office staff and their office staff. And it went all the way from, do we adopt the federal definition of workforce housing, which means it's got to have federal funding and federal occupancy requirements and all of that, to where we are today. We ultimately concluded based on the process that got us the PCD agreement, that the council did not intend that these would be workforce housing, federal workforce housing projects. And so we then invited the applicant to propose to us how they're going to comply with something that the council intended would be available for workforce, but also wasn't a federally funded work housing project. And so we went back and forth, and there was quite a lot of dialogue in and through those things. And I'm proud of what's been presented to the council. I think that the applicant should receive kudos for those details, but also your planning staff have worked really hard to get something that I think addresses some of our housing challenges, addresses the needs that new home buyers face, and I think in a way that's going to be an attractive and owned, occupant owned product, which is something that our city needs.
I actually am really just impressed with our staff and also with the developer, because this was one of those conditions that when we were on the council back then, this was important to us, and I just appreciate that was remembered and that you're complying with that, bringing that forward early in your development. So just really appreciate that. That means a lot that you would remember that and you would act on it, and that you would be creative in understanding that was really the intent, as I remember in those discussions with that PCD approval. So appreciate that. I'll invite the applicant to come forward to answer any questions that the council may have.
Don Bean with D.R. Horton. And before you go, I just wanted to say the staff has been very good to work with. We had really no plan on how we were going to make this work out. And then just working together, coming up with a few suggestions. I appreciate their work, and I think it's a very good deal. I think it will be great for the community, great for the city, and great for us as the builder.
Council, questions for the applicant?
I have one question. So how did you arrive at the name Hoodoo? I don't think there's any hoodoos out there.
We named most of the subdivisions after geological features or trails or something in the parks around the area. And so Hoodoo came as one of them. We were getting desperate on names, actually.
I have to laugh about Hoodoo because there's a Hoodoo Street next to the Auto Mall, just so you know. So
Oh,
you
really?
can't even use Hoodoo as a street name. So I laughed at the name of the subdivision was Hoodoo.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, thanks.
Council, further deliberation and or a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve a preliminary plat for Hoodoo Hollow at Long Valley located at Lost Spring Drive and Riggs Loop Drive.
Motion by Martinson.
Second.
Second by Coates. We'll go roll call. Martinson.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Ivy.
Aye.
Casperson.
Aye.
The item passes unanimously. Thank you for bringing forward a really good project. Look forward to hearing feedback on how the workforce housing, how your approach to filling that need goes. Item 8, ordinances. 8A is consideration to approve an ordinance for general plan amendment G-22-07 from open space OS to estate residential ER located at approximately 2335 East Washington Dam Road. The applicant is Lance Miller. Providing the council with a report on this item is our Community Development Director, Drew Ellerman.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Applicant is seeking to amend the general plan use map at this particular location. The requested area covers approximately 43.77 acres. Again, going from the open space to the estate residential. In the estate residential designation, it carries a density ratio of 0.45 to 2.0 dwelling units per acre. It allows for the RA2, the RA1, the RA half, and the R130 zoning designations. The surrounding general land use designations are open space to the north and the west, open space and estate residential to the east, and estate residential to the south. Staff's reviewed the request to change and is comfortable with the proposal find it to be in harmony with the surrounding uses and of course, the general plan. Planning Commission reviewed the request at their November 2nd meeting. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of G-22-07 to amend the general plan land use map from the current open space to the proposed estate residential, and that is as designated in the exhibits, and that's on to you, the City Council. I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has on this, and don't know what happened to my map right there, but somebody just swiped it. But anyway, we'll get it.
Drew, is any of this in the floodplain?
Yes, it is. In fact, what I want to do, I'm going to pull up the our city map here, and I'll kind of show that to you.
And Drew, do we have a concern about future access to this parcel?
There is a slight, but I'll tell you what kind of the plan of action is that we're going to hopefully do here. So Councilman, I'm going to bring up and just show you where the floodplain runs here. And so the properties in question are kind of where my arrow is here, if you remember from the previous thing. So the river has the floodway. You can't do anything in it, but then part of that property, you can see that, general plan change goes right up here if you follow my arrow and then kind of down through here. So this particular portion will be in the floodplain. But the lots are going to be fairly big lots. I think they plan on only doing 6, I think, at the most in all that property. It's a family property and they want to break it up into bigger, just kind of mini estate, ranchette type thing. So there's not going to be a lot of lots on here. The intent is right now, again, I can't, if we change it, they can do whatever, but their intent is to not have a lot of them. So of course, they're aware of the floodplains there and just won't be able to build any homes. I mean, they can, but they have to mitigate it out. Most people just don't bother putting anything in there if they don't have to. So as for access, don't know why this is so different than my computer in my office. It's funny. Okay. Then you either go too far or too close. Currently right here, you can kind of see where my arrow is, hopefully right there. There's already, there's a given ingress egress easement that these folks back here, the Martins, use, and it runs through, and this has all been for years since I've worked here, a recorded ingress egress easement. Little quick history, Countryway Estates, phase 2 was supposed to be these lots over here, and they were going to be 1 acre lots, but then the Walls changed their mind and sold this big piece to the Levitts and retained this one piece back here where my arrow is. So there is a recorded easement here right now. Now the applicant knows that if they come back to do any subdividing, they're going to have to get with, can't remember these good folks' name here. Yeah, I can't remember, but I think they've been in conversations with each other, and they know they're going to have to put a full-blown residential road back here. But they plan on subdividing as well. That's what this family wants to break this lot down in the future. So they're all going to kind of work together when they come back for that subdividing. And the plan is right now to turn this in. And that's our hope, is that this will be a residential road all the way back to here. Now we may have to, because of the depth and everything, find a way to do it just an emergency access over here, because we can't let this be a full-blown entrance exit over onto Countryway because of the bend on the road, and everything would be hard in access. We've looked at access management. It's difficult to get it there, but those are still things we're going to be considering. So it'll either be a secondary access this way for emergency ingress and egress for emergency services.
So and we can work on that. You could use the old canal if you had to, right? Emergency wise,
and we could also come back over here if we needed to.
But the question I have is that, so if that's their access and their legal access, that will be a fully improved public road.
That's the plan right now.
Okay.
I'm hoping that's still the plan right
All
now.
right. So just, I mean, I know I'm not trying to dive into the weeds today. I'm just trying to understand because it just is kind of hidden in the back corner there. So.
Yeah, no, because when they came into us, I said, this is definitely going to have to be made, that way. We just can't afford to put that many lots on an easement, or call it, a 10 flag lot kind of development. Those, they really don't exist. I'm just joking.
Do we can we put a condition that legal access will have to be provided if additional breakdown? Because we're approving the general plan amendment, and then we'll have to do the zone change.
Yeah, I'd probably, we generally don't like to put conditions on general plan and zoning, but if we're going to put a condition, I'd rather be on that zone change than on the general plan, because this is still so, general. So, but we'll, in fact, that's a good thing for I think the applicants here, and hopefully they can bring you back something at that time of what that plan may be at that zone change time. But yeah, just so they're aware, the access is going to be a thing they're going to have to deal with and take care of. So,
Is the applicant here or the applicant's representative?
I'm online if you can hear me.
yeah, we hear you.
Great. I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to the council and an opportunity for the council to ask any questions they may have to you.
Is this Lance?
I don't have. It is Lance. Yes. Sorry.
Lance Miller.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them. Yeah, we're working on the access, working on the multiple issues that face this property.
Council, any questions for the applicant on this particular item? Lance, we're glad you stayed online, but I think this council is ready to vote on your item. Drew, leave this map up. I want to make a point after they vote on this. Council, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance general plan amendment G-22-7 from open space to estate residential located approximately 2335 East Washington Dam Road.
I have a motion by Councilmember Casperson.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Coates. We'll go roll call. Henderson.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Ivy.
Aye.
Casperson.
Aye.
Martinson.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Please.
I was hoping to see Daryl Blake here tonight. He was my scout leader when I was a kid, and he was the best. I haven't seen him for years, but he's a good man.
Zoom in down toward the Blakes just a little bit.
Which one? Toward the dam road, or?
No, zoom in on the property just kind of down below the canal, south of the canal.
Okay, I'm not sure which way you want. me to
Go towards the river.
Go north.
River. Okay.
Other way.
Oh, north.
Yeah, you're other north.
River.
Now
River
just
to
a
the east
little-
and the north. Let
just
me.
a little bit west
Sorry,
now.
let me back out.
There you go. Okay, that's good.
Sorry.
Anyway, I'm making this more complicated, but if on that property is the old John D. Lee Bishop Storehouse that used to be uptown on John D. Lee's lot that was right next to the Covington home. And so the property owner, knowing they were going to sell this, has reached out to me, and I went down there with Barry, and we're devising a plan to relocate that. It's actually in pretty good condition, and the hope is to get it up there and incorporate it into the Covington home, to that property to the north that Roy Nyson donated to the city, and we would incorporate the old John D. Lee Bishop Storehouse into that historic area. So I couldn't let this map be pulled up without sharing that information. So
Is it this one right here, Mayor?
no, it's across the street. It's littler. Yeah, it's pretty small. It's about 12 by 12.
Is it over here?
No, it's just right across the dirt road from the one you're pointing at.
Oh, that. Okay.
Yep. So anyway, apparently they wheeled it down there years ago on telephone poles, and I'm not sure how Blake's going to plan on getting it back up here, but welcome to the city. Okay. All right, let's move along. 8B, consideration to approve an ordinance amending a portion of the Washington City Code Title 9, Chapter 16, off-street parking Community Development Director Drew Ellerman will present on this item tonight. And we have had considerable discussion on this item at previous work sessions. Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, the city is wishing to amend its parking regulation codes and specifically 9-16-5 and 9-16-12. Again, we're just changing the way we calculate the parking and where it is found. So let me just kind of scroll up. So we have now some new charts that we will use so people can calculate for their multifamily and their single family parking standards. Made the corrections to the bottom. I hope everybody caught those. It's right below this particular second box.
So Drew,
yes.
we need to add it to the apartments. I think you might have misunderstood me. The 300 foot is from the apartment building.
Okay, well, we probably want it on both, I bet then.
I do.
I think this should cover,
On both. We need it on both.
I think this might cover both of them though, because the way it's, they'll check
Not
and.
when I read it, it did not read that way. You need to make sure you duplicate it. And I wish we
Okay.
could put them side by side on the same page. I don't know why we have so much blank page.
That's how the codifiers, if you go into it, that's why it's written. It's not, I didn't choose to do something really funky and weird, but that's how they do it. I don't know why, but so I'm just trying to keep in line with how they codified. So we'll, if that's the thing, we'll just make a duplicate copy of this and put it underneath the other box then.
I think if we're comfortable moving forward, we just make that a condition that 300 feet be applied to the apartments and condos.
I agree. I saw that soon.
Okay, so just to again re-verify, we're going with the 1.5 on 1 bedrooms and 2.25 on 3 bedroom, and then we have the qualifier in there if they have is equal to or more 1 bedroom, they can drop the 3 down to 2, and then down here in our guest parking, we're going to go to 1 per 3.25, and we are also changing that you're only allowed to get then in those that have 2-car garages with double driveways, they can use 30% of those driveways, count as one for their visitor parking. So, and I think we've covered everything else. So I hope that covers everything the council wanted, and I'll just get that in part of your motion, just say approve it and add the 300 foot from the footprint extra in there, and we'll just get that duplicated, copied over.
Mayor, you ready for a motion?
Council?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Drew, you did a great job on this. I think we nailed it down pretty tight. I mean, we worked on it a couple of different times, but I like the way it turned out. So,
It almost feels anticlimactic at this point.
yeah.
Yes, I'm ready for a motion.
Well, we'll make it climatic for you. We'll make a motion to approve the Washington City Code Title 9, Chapter 16, off-street parking with the additional condition to add the 300-foot requirement to the apartments and condos section.
I have a motion by Councilman Coates.
Mayor, I will second that.
Second by Councilman Ivy. We'll go roll call. Coates.
Aye.
Ivy.
Aye.
Casperson.
Aye.
Martinson.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Item 8C, consideration to approve an ordinance amending technical wording in Washington City Code Title 8, Chapter 9, Landscaping and Water Conservation. City Manager Jeremy Redd.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm hoping to get the award for the fastest and most boring item, and we'll see how that works. But I think everyone's having flashbacks to when we spent all the time working on our landscaping ordinance, which is a good ordinance. It's been good. We've received a lot of good feedback on it, and I think it's going to do what we intended it to do. However, sometimes we build the ordinances and we add language, and it doesn't mean the same thing to us that it does to people who have to enforce the ordinance. And this is one of those cases. So in the ordinance, it's a very easy word change. We have the term hot water recirculation systems in our ordinance, in our code. And that term has become somewhat problematic to try to enforce. So we're either ending up with a big expensive system that was not the intention of our code, or we're ending up with something that doesn't conserve water, which is also not the intention of the code. So in speaking with our building department, they feel like if we just clarify, change the word to say hot water recirculation pump or pumps, that's a lot clearer definition of what we're looking for. So we're not we're not confusing people, and we actually are getting the water savings that we're hoping for. So that gives them a lot of latitude with how they want to handle it, and get the water savings. So
As part of the system conversation, having insulation on the pipes.
it can, yes. Yep. If you put in a system, then it does require insulation on the pipes. And if we call it a pump or pumps, then we're not designating whether or not they have to have that or anything about the system. We've also seen some smaller systems that don't really save water, but they're called water recirculation systems. And so we just want to make sure they just have to have a pump. To be pumping the water around so that it's warm when you turn it on. That's the goal. And if people would like to also save energy, they can insulate those pipes at their discretion.
I'm ready for a motion.
Mayor, I can make that motion to approve an ordinance amending technical wording in Washington City Code Title 8, Chapter 9, Landscaping and Water Conservation.
Motion by Councilmember Ivy.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Coates. Roll call. Ivy.
Aye.
Casperson.
Aye.
Martinson.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
I would just
Motion
ask Councilman
approves.
Coates to take note of how briefly written that ordinance is.
I appreciate that.
Did you
And,
wanna-
and I was going to say you guys wanted a short discussion and you ruined it. So let's move on.
It didn't win the prize. Okay. Item 9, resolution. This is consideration to approve a resolution amending the interlocal agreement with the Washington City Redevelopment Agency for the Sienna Hills Community Reinvestment Project. The applicant is Tri-State Funding LLC. Economic Development Director Rusty Hughes will present on this. And I will just remind this council that as the Redevelopment Agency Board, you just approved the other half of it about 2 hours ago. Go ahead, Rusty.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to belabor this one because we discussed this so much in the RDA meeting. But I did want to note a few things. And that's the impact, that not just for the general fund for the city, but for the residents of Washington City because of this project. So I just looked at the numbers and I realized that some of you were not on the council when the original tax increment financing incentive agreement was approved. And so I just wanted to go over that just so that you can understand the impact. So although none of the property taxing entities were asked to participate in this particular agreement, they will benefit to the tune of about $5.6 million because of the capital investment of about $85 million is what's expected beyond the public. We were talking public infrastructure. They still have to build all those dealerships, and they're estimating about $85 million capital investment into the area. That will yield, for example, that will yield the school district about $385,000 a year. That will yield the city, and that's just on property tax, and that will yield the city of Washington about $68,000 a year just on property tax. But of course, this isn't a project that we were hoping to get a lot of property tax, although that's significant. And they are taxed at 100% market value, unlike residential, which gets a discount. So it helps to offset the tax burden for residents of Washington City. The real big impact is sales tax. So it's estimated that Washington City will make our portion of sales tax for the automobiles that are sold in this automobile over the first 10 years. So starting with one dealership and then ramping their way up. So this isn't even at full production, would be about $35 million over the 10-year period. And that is about with the taking out for the incentive, it would be about $270,000 a year for that. So that is the impact. And then this is the final step in augmenting that incentive agreement so that rather than it starting in January of next year, which there is no automobile yet, it gives them some time to build the first dealership, and then that starts the incentive agreement in 2024.
And I apologize, council. I said 2 hours. It was about 4.5 hours ago that you saw this. questions for Rusty on this? Are we ready for a motion, council? Who would like to make that? Councilman Martinson, you want to take a stab?
I sure can. I'll make a motion that we approve a resolution amending the interlocal agreement with Washington City Redevelopment Agency for the Sienna Hills Community Reinvestment Project area.
I have a motion by Councilmember Martinson,
I'll second that, Mayor.
a second by Councilmember Henderson. We'll go roll call on this. Did I start with you last time, Ivy?
Aye.
I'd be happy to
Aye.
start.
Casperson,
Aye.
Aye.
Martinson, aye. Henderson,
Aye.
Coates,
Aye.
Ivy.
I'm having
It's
deja
unanimous
vu. Aye.
and getting late. Okay, item number 10, we need to focus on this one. 10A is consideration to approve an amendment to the Stuckey Farm Development Agreement. The applicants are South Landing Development LLC and Preserve at Stuckey Farms LLC, both of whom are here. And I will turn this to our city attorney, Thad Sigmiller, to give the council a report.
Mayor, thank you for your time. And as you mentioned, both what we're calling the original developer and the new developer are present today. And they've both been advised that the council may wish to speak with them. And so I'll try to be brief. In 2011, Washington City Council entered into a development agreement for the Stuckey Farms, as is required by our code for the PCD approval. And that agreement contained a paragraph titled "Change in Developer." In that paragraph, the city made it clear that the identity of the developer is of particular concern to the city, especially their qualifications and financing ability. And as a result, the original developer was prohibited from transferring development rights without review and approval of the city council. And so that's the purpose of tonight's hearing, is to present to the city council the process we've gone through. That paragraph provides two ways in which this can happen. And the reason for this is it's the concern of the city that the obligations and duties of the developer apply to any subsequent developer, just like they were approved at the time of approval. And so the two alternatives was presentation of an agreement between the two that the city finds satisfactory, or presentation of letters from each indicating that they are aware of the PCD agreement, aware of its terms, and agree to abide by them. Because Stuckey Farms is an important part of our city, I required that they do both. And so this agreement, which is the first document in your packet, this is the first prong, which is an agreement between the original developer and the new developer that the city finds satisfactory. And so if you've read through it, you see the terms there. One thing it does do is it proposes, you'll see in subsection E, adding another 5 years to the expiration date. The original expiration was 15 years from 2011, so there's about 5 remaining. This is going to add another 5 onto that, so that the new developer has a little more time to go to work on what they're acquiring. The exhibits to this agreement are also important. I wanted to review those with council. The first exhibit that was important and we worked on a lot was to identify what the vested uses are at the time of transfer. And so this document is from 2019. It's the last time that the plan was amended. But you'll see the shading and the acreages and the designations I have required in the agreement and in the letters that both the original developer and the acquiring developer acknowledge that these are the vested uses and this is the approved plan at the time of transfer. And those aren't being proposed to change at this point. At this point, it's just the development right that would transfer. This plan would stay the same. As the city's experience has been, PCD plans do sometimes need to be amended, and nothing says they can't bring an amendment in the future. But we're very clear that at the time of transfer, it's under this already approved and entitled use. The next exhibit is meant to be illustrative to the council. The purpose is to show the dark gray area is what we call private ownership. These are areas that have been developed and sold to private ownership. And so neither the original developer nor the new developer will retain any obligation or liability for those. The red areas are what are called excluded. Those are excluded from sale. So these are what the original developer will retain obligation and liability for. And so that would be the developer that we've worked with, South Landing Development, will retain those and work to finish those. Everything else in the light green and the dark green are labeled as acquired open space and purchasing properties.
Thad, what about amenities?
Which ones?
The lakes.
The lakes are covered in the acquired areas.
So it'll be the responsibility of the new developer to improve those lakes.
Correct. And we have verified that the water rights are conveying together with that responsibility. So they'll receive the water rights that were intended to do that. So you'll see right now they're vested to produce 25.4 acres of lakes.
So at the I think my concern is that we've had, well, I shouldn't say concern, just had people say, hey, we're not getting all our amenities. That example, they're building the house next to it, the lakes aren't done. I just want to make sure that, is there a trigger in the current PC that starts those?
There's not. The triggers really should have been placed by the council at the time that preliminary and final plats are approved, and I would suggest that you remember that as future plats come. The PCD requires those details, but doesn't connect the construction of a lake to, you know, any sort of completion percentage of houses or anything of that nature. We then have the legal description, and then on this first document, we also have the letter from the original developer to the council, and this is the letter that satisfies the second prong for ability to convey development rights. Inside your packet, there's also signature pages. There's also the new developer's letter, and then I think behind that, I skipped over this one, the new developer's qualifications and introduction. And so this is a scenario where it would be fair to say that the city attorney kind of bogged it down. I wanted to bog it down to make sure we asked them to do a little more than required, do both prongs and get that provided to the council. Any questions that you might have for me? Would you like to speak to the new developer or the old developer, or both?
Maybe just a clarifying question, council. Just, I know this is the case, but just so it's on the record. So the only thing that we're changing in this PCD is we're just introducing a new buyer.
Yeah, the PCD plan is not changing. I've been very, very militant about that. The developer with rights to own and develop parts of it is changing, is proposed to be changed. But the plan, its densities, its uses is not changing at this time.
And the new owners know that very well, right?
Yes, they've had to write an agreement and a letter just to make me satisfied on that point.
Council, do you have interest in speaking to the current property owner or the applicant, the purchaser?
The applicant.
We do. Which one, Councilman?
The new owners.
Okay.
Before I sit down, Mayor, I would just, one small detail. The real estate transaction conveying these rights is pending tonight's result. And so if there is a motion to approve, if you would just mention approve on the condition that the real estate transaction closes.
You got that? Okay, I'd invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to come forward and just state your name for the record.
My name is Sean Colarusso, and I represent Preserve Stuckey Farms LLC, otherwise known as New Developer. By the way, Mr. Mayor, thank you for recognizing my grandfather, Roy Nyson. Really appreciated that.
Yep. That was intentional.
Well, again, it was appreciated, and if he were with me, he would confirm that Stuckey Farms grew the absolute best melons on the planet.
Well, appreciate that, Sean. Councilman Ivey, you had a few questions.
So I just really have one, Sean, and that is, this project was awarded an impact fee deferral. Do you have intentions to use that going forward?
So as far as that impact deferral agreement,
Maybe I'll add in, this project was not, a prior developer was, but it was tied to.
So that wouldn't transfer to the new owner?
No, that impact deferral agreement is not transferable. It never got signed by the parties. But you're absolutely correct. It regarded uses on these lands. But yeah, it's not transferable. It wasn't signed. It's the city's position at this point that it wasn't ever accepted by the parties.
Didn't realize that. Good question. Answered. Good answer. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for clarifying.
How late is it? Thank you. Pat me right.
It's Thursday.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. That was
Further
my only
questions
question.
for the applicant?
We're excited to see what you can do to keep working on this project. It's been a good project.
We are too. Thank you.
So
I'm going to just throw a couple questions out. Your resume shows past project with Traverse Mountain and also with Warner Gateway. You can just speak a little bit to your involvement in either of those, or was that a partner?
Sure. So McKay Christensen, he's not here tonight. He's one of our principals as well. Not only did he play professional baseball for the LA Dodgers and the Chicago White Sox, he comes from a family of developers. So we like McKay for a couple of reasons. One, he makes our dodgeball team significantly stronger. But two, his experience. So he worked alongside his father and his uncle with the development known as Traverse Mountain. So that's approximately 2,700 acres, about 8,000 residential units, and nearly 4 million square feet of commercial space. So he has extensive experience with large planned community developments. So we're very excited to have him as part of the team. And then my partner, Mike Uselak, and I, we acquired, along with Visionary Homes, our strategic builder, the remaining phases of Warner Gateway. And over the last 18 months, we've developed the remaining 3 phases of Warner Gateway. So we have local experience as far as nuanced soils, what that looks like, what that means, and it's been a very good project, we believe, for Washington. So it was a project that was actually struggling, and we were able to take that project and move that project forward.
I'll ask another question here with, so if this is approved and if the transfer of ownership goes through, what's your timeline? What priority will Stuckey be with, with built? I mean, it's a big PCD that's been, approved years ago, and
Right.
it has some build out, but there's a lot of acreage and a lot of capacity there. Kind of what's going to be your approach?
So our approach, largely because of what's happened with the economy, it will be to meet with staff, meet with city council, and work on the PCD, take a look at what needs to be cleaned up potentially, but the vision and what's already approved under the PCD, that's really our plan. Our plan is to move forward with that. Take a look at where we need to invest in infrastructure in the short term and which specific aspects of the project make the most sense for unlocking and opening up.
Okay.
Sean,
Yeah.
part of what you're purchasing are areas that are designated commercial. And we'll hold you to whatever you say here, but any thought about what type of commercial might make sense down there? What your vision is for the commercial parcels that exist?
So we've already been approached by a number of groups on the commercial side. In fact, we had an interesting meeting just recently about another sports complex, right? A group that is attached to a pickleball and tennis club, and they feel like they could, through their marketing, attract people from not only the community in Salt Lake, but also out of state for camps, tournaments, clubs. We really want Stuckey Farms to be a destination. Carl Larson and David Larson all along have communicated this really is a project and a subdivision that should be focused on the family experience, right? And so we're looking at opportunities that would be supportive of that, as well as supportive services, right? So when you think about sports complexes, what comes to mind for us are food courts, like again, fast casual that would be appropriate. So that way those individuals or families that are attending these events or camps, they have some place close to get whatever they need, as opposed to traveling across town, which is so common with camps and tournaments. But then also, I know that we've already got within the PCD approval storage. So in the flight path overlay, obviously that will be considered. We're in conversations with the individuals that transacted with the original developer. Fuel and convenience makes a lot of sense for obviously the on-ramp, off-ramp, and the road to Warner Valley. You know, we watch a lot of traffic go down Washington Fields, and just personal experience, you have to travel quite a ways to get to fuel and convenience. And so we've had some high-level conversations already with some major players in the fuel and convenience space.
Anything else, council?
Just, Sean, if while you're there, would you just talk about you got almost 25 acres worth of lakes and almost 200, acres of open space? Would you just share? I know you kind of mentioned that, but just speak more directly about what you see in those. I mean, your lakes, there was a question asked about when those would come online. I mean, that's kind of been an ongoing question. I wouldn't say a concern, but a question. Would you just talk to that, just to kind of get an idea of what you're thinking?
Sure. I would say that the priority around amenities is to first and foremost take care of the existing residents, right? We know just through conversations and reviewing some of the notes from the various HOAs or sub-associations within the PCD, that's a priority. And I would say that the priority for them might not be another lake, because the lake is currently under construction, but perhaps another facility where they can meet and not be necessarily in potential conflict with the resort side. Because right now the farmhouse and the amenities attached to the farmhouse serve both the existing residents as well as the resort side. And there's also a public component as well. And so I know that many existing homeowners and future homeowners would like to have their own clubhouse, would like to have their own facilities. And so as we've had conversations, that has been more of a priority in the short term, is identifying ways for us to generate the revenue, to unlock that type of value within the project, and then include future lakes or future open space development as we develop through the project. And some of that, I know, as far as open space, would tie into potentially a sports complex or two.
And certainly there's groundwater there and water rights that you have, but as you're having conversations back with staff, I would just encourage you to be open with staff, and staff to be, give good consideration to what's the best use of that groundwater, and what's the appropriate amount of storage in lakes, and if there's, let's just be smart with water in the desert.
Agreed.
So
agreed. We've got to be
responsible. What I'm trying to say without saying is, let's just be smart with that water and work together on it.
Absolutely. We're committed to that.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else for the applicant? Thank you.
Appreciate
Sean.
your time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, council, you've heard from Thad. You've heard from the new developer. It's time for you to discuss and or take action.
I'll make a motion, Mayor, to approve and amend the Stuckey Farms Development Agreement applicant Southland Development LLC and Preserve at Stuckey Farms LLC.
And with the condition?
With the condition to approve based on the sale and closing of the sale.
Yeah, contingent on the closing of the sale. Okay. Have a motion by Councilmember Coates.
I'll second that.
Second by Councilmember Martinson. Let's go, Martinson. Actually, you know what? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll wait to see how that transaction goes in future Stuckey Farms. Item 11 is power. 11A is discussion and consideration to approve the use of the power rate Stabilization Fund. Power Director Rick Hansen has been a trooper here tonight. Almost last on the agenda. Thank you, Tara. He, along with City Manager Jeremy Redd, will talk about potential use of the stabilization fund and get your feedback and direction, Council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is one of those presentations that I wish I didn't have to make. But nonetheless, it's important that we address some of the issues that have happened this last summer and continue to and will face in the future. So I've got a few slides here. Hopefully, your packet had these slides as well. So hopefully you've looked at them. Shouldn't hit you as a total surprise. Just to give a little history for this past summer, July and August, our peak load was just a little over 51 megawatts, which was just slightly under our peak load of last year. That was primarily due to Washington County this last summer was a warm summer, but we didn't have extended periods of times, July and August, that were over 110 degrees like we had in 21. However, it was interesting to note that the nighttime temperatures were warmer than normal, and so we actually saw an increased usage during the night periods. And the wholesale pricing for July and August was high, but not too far from what we expected during peak times in the $100 to $200 a megawatt hour, which that's 10 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Then September happened. If you remember, the first week to 10 days or so of September was extremely hot, and it wasn't just hot here, it was hot throughout the entire West. Our peak load was a little over 50 megawatts, which almost matched our July peak during that period of time, which was a 20% increase over our peak the year prior of just over 41 megawatts. And we had a little bit of a perfect storm. We normally, see a load reduction in September. So our contract purchases, we lowered those in September to follow our normal load patterns. So with the load pattern or our resources reducing like we normally do, and the extraordinary high loads, it created that we had much higher market exposure than we typically do. The Western Interconnect, the entire West, it's called WEC, set an all-time peak high during September that same week. So did UAMPS, the Wasatch Front, Rocky Mountain Power, and most of the northern cities experienced their all-time peaks. During that 10 to 12 days, the wholesale power costs were extremely high. We had multiple afternoon and evenings that were over $1,000 a megawatt hour, which translates to $1 a kilowatt hour. And so when we're selling it for 10 to 15 cents, that's not a good business model during that time. And so this is
you can make up for it in volume.
Yeah, and that's what we tried to do. And so, it wasn't a good thing. And so this is our peak KW load, and you can see this peak here. It's definitely out of the norm for September. And then this was from UAMPS showing what the wholesale power costs were from June 1st to the middle of September. And you can see starting June, July, and August, pretty much what we had expected. And then that first week in September hit, and it just went crazy. And then this is a blow up of that week. And you can see it wasn't just 1 or 2 hours on 1 or 2 days. It was multiple days, multiple hours. And so consequently, being exposed to the market at that period of time, the dollars just rack up extremely fast. Our 3 highest power bills ever were in July, August, and September of this year. July and August were $2.2 and $2.3 million, which is pretty much what we expected. In fact, I think in those 2 months, I was about 50,000 under what was budgeted. However, the September bill was just barely under 2.7 million. If you had asked me that we'd have our highest bill in September, just really never really would have crossed my mind. October and continuing into November, the wholesale power prices have definitely come down from September, but they're still higher than this, typically this time of year. And so this is on an average dollar per kilowatt hour over the last 5 years of what you can see. And you can see this year just is extremely different than the previous 5, 6, and even beyond. So what does all this mean for the power department? And the city, fortunately, in 2010 and in 2017, implemented a couple things to help protect in this kind of an event, because it's not the first time this has happened in the industry. One, when the last major rate change was done in 2017, the city implemented, they call it a power cost adjustment, which was part of that rate study process, and that's been in effect since just a little before I took this position. And then back in 2010, they established a rate stabilization fund. So I'll relatively quickly go through these, but stop me if you've got questions. The PCA is actually not a mystery. It's pretty straightforward. During that last rate study, basically they put for wholesale power the 7.11 cents per kilowatt hour into the base rate. The PCA can be calculated on a monthly basis, or is calculated on or adjusted on a monthly basis, and it could either be positive or negative. In fact, 2 years ago in July, it was negative. So it shows how quickly things have changed. The PCA is based on a rolling average of the wholesale power costs for the previous 12 months. And the PCA is basically the difference between that rolling average and this 7.11 cents. And so it's a fairly straightforward calculation. So it's intended to dampen the impacts of cost changes to that the city experiences on the wholesale power side, but it's not intended to generally recover large percentages, and we'll address where we're going on some of this. And so this is historically over since the PCA was implemented, what it's done. You know, first few years it just hovered generally under a half a cent. It was pretty small. And again, this little green spot down here, it actually went negative in 2020. And then last year it started to rise, and Jeremy and I have been watching it close and stayed there. And then starting in May, it started to go up quicker. And then again, if by pure calculation, it should be over 3 cents right now, which is a significant percentage of our rate. And then I'll explain this blue line here in just a second. And so we do track the PCA very closely. And when the PCA was approaching the 1.5 cent range, Jeremy and I met and discussed in detail whether we should limit that, because it felt like it was starting to get higher than what it was intended. And we decided for the summer to hold it at 1.5, and so we could determine whether this was a short-term trend, a long-term trend, and decide. And at the beginning of the summer, we tracked the PCA, how much over or under collecting it is. And at the start of the summer, it had a positive balance. As of now, it has a negative balance. And with the large increase we saw in September, we elected to implement the PCA at 2.5 cents. Again, the calculation was 3.3. And so this teal line represents the calculation, and the blue line represents what was implemented. So we were well under that. Then shifting to the rate stabilization fund that was started in 2010, and actually in our Power Board meeting, our chairman, Mike Dinsmore, gave a little more history than I had. That it was around the 2017 timeframe that fund was near zero, and that's one reason that prompted the rate study. And so the current balance that's in that fund has been generated in the last 5 years, basically. And the document that governs that says at the end of the year, 25% of the net margin would be put into this fund, or basically the profits from the operating side of the department. The document caps it at $2.5 million or the sum of the 3 highest bills. So with the 3 bills we had this summer, the cap would actually be over $7 million. The current balance is about 4.1 as of the end of last fiscal year. And I know Brian, I don't think he's got into the details. So there's probably a little more in there than the 4.1, but this is the best numbers available at this time. To give you a little background of what we have been doing, what we're going to do, and then we'll get some input from the council. We've contracted with Utility Financial Solutions, who's done our previous rate studies, to do a new cost of service and rate study. We kicked this off pretty fast, and we actually have our first scheduled meeting to go over the data requests that they need next Monday. And so they'll evaluate the whole situation, come back with a recommendation on rates and those kind of things, and where we are in fund balances. We're going to continue to pursue different resources to protect us better from the market. That can come in lots of forms: short-term, long-term contracts, which have the advantages of being quicker to implement. Natural gas resource options. We're working with UAMPS on a geothermal resource study. More solar projects with and without battery, possibly expanding the wind project we already have. And then another option might be to add some generators at our existing facility. We have space for some there. But keeping in mind, a new physical resource generally is going to take 2 to 5 years to bring online. We talked with CAT. If we placed an order for a brand new unit today, they said it's a little over 2 years delivery time. So
I'm trying to remember, how many of those natural gas CAT generators do we have out there?
we have 3 2-megawatt units. The newer units are about 2.5 each, and we have potential space to up to 5 more. But the units run probably around $3 million a piece. So
And natural gas has been a good good wholesale power source, relatively.
it has, but you're exposed again somewhat to the same type of market fluctuation
volatility right now
because of the fuel cost. And then the potential with the natural gas is what happens. It's a fossil-based resource. Does Congress or the state or somebody say they're going to limit those
I guess
emissions?
my question there is if I remember when I was on the council, when we originally moved forward with those CAT natural gas power sources, I'm just wondering if that's a better peak load power source than buying it on the open market. And if I recognize it's a few years out, but if we have the space out there, maybe that's a good thing to consider because isn't that what those are designed for? Is the peak load, and isn't that what hit us in September?
Correct. Typically, our units historically have run June, July, and August, and maybe a little in September. During this period of time, we ran them a lot, as much as we can. But yes, definitely, that's one of the options that we're looking at.
What is a 2.5 megawatt
Uh-huh.
What is the cost on that?
The last
How-
number I got, which is about a year old, was about $3 million.
So this is a significant investment.
Yes. Yes, and so we got to try to weigh all those different pros and cons. And a couple other things, to just give you a reminder, the Red Mesa Solar will be our next resource that comes on in a couple months or 3 months. It's a small amount, 1 megawatt, but we'll take every little bit we can. And that will be available for next summer. The Steel Solar 1 and 2, between those will have about 7 megawatts, but that won't be there until the end of 2023, early 2024.
So these would obviously be beneficial in a hot, unusually hot September, because you would think the sun is out when the.
Yeah. I mean, it would definitely help compared to where we're at now. Again, it would be, no matter what, if you have a September like that, it's going to be unusual and not expected. And then our long-term larger resource is the carbon-free power project, and there'll be more coming on that in the next few months as well for you on that. A couple other things that didn't materialize that UAMPS has, and we participated in, was a project called Enchant, which was a coal plant in New Mexico that was going to buy an existing asset and then put carbon capture on it. That was originally planned to be online, I think it was August of this year. Anyway, the wheels fell off. They weren't able to acquire the old facility, and so that was not available. The Muddy Creek, Kern River, more or less pulled out of that. And Photosol, that project also kind of died on the vine. So there were several projects that we've been trying to pursue that look very promising. These were all, like the Enchant was in the $30, $40 range resource. Some other things impacting the price is drought. The big hydro dams at Hoover and Lake Powell, they're roughly about half output right now, and potentially could even get less. Coal and other baseload resources are being retired, and so it's a supply and demand issue. In the meantime, we've got incentives to electrify transportation, and at the same time, the same government that does that hasn't really addressed the supply side that's needed in order to do that. So there's a lot of dynamics going on. So the input and direction that we would like, and we'll show you what the Power Board recommended, is on the PCA. The big question is, should we continue the practice of artificially keeping the PCA a little bit lower than what the calculated value is? And if so, what guidance would you provide to us? I think we're obviously safe if we're underneath what the calculated amount is, but what that does is it underfunds what that's intended to do. So it's doing that as a short-term relief, I guess, to the customers. Then on the rate stabilization fund, should we use some of that fund, or at least authorize the use of the fund? And then we'll work with Brian as it gets towards the end of the fiscal year, and with Jeremy of, do we really need to pull the trigger on that or not? But we would like to have that authorization.
How far underwater did we get in September?
Okay, just to give you a little context, last year's September bill was 1.2 million. I budgeted 1.5 and it came in at 2.7. So it's substantial.
So we're
about 1.2 million
1.2
over what we budgeted.
How much is in that fund?
4.1 right now.
4.1.
So we spent a lot of time on the Power Board on this, and we have some good Power Board members and some not so good.
And Dick's here, so feel free to quiz him.
It's a tough situation we're in. I think Rick does a really good job of keeping us in that market, and we do have that top level that we're in those hot months that we're always in that volatile market. I think there's some things I want to see that we do a little different, and I think we can work on those. And it's just because of these things that we're seeing in the market. I mean, who would have thought that it was over $1,000? I mean, it kills you that it's that much. But that's what I appreciate the past council and past board members that set up this fund, that we have $4 million to protect our residents so they're not getting hit. Otherwise, our residents will be getting hit with, how are we going to pay for this? It would go over the next year. They'd have to pay for 1.2 million out of all the residents. And so I think it's important that we have the money, my opinion. And I don't, Rick hasn't said it yet, but the power board recommended that we use the stabilization funds to cover this cost. So it was 1.5 up to 1.5, right, Rick?
Correct.
To move forward with this stabilization. I think it's important that we do that for our residents so they're not hit with this bill. I mean, they've already prepaid it, is how I look at it. They've prepaid this bill. So let's use that money for the prepayment to cover this thing.
Rainy day fund.
Yeah.
Sunny day fund.
Basically, that's what it is.
And moving on with the PCA, I don't know the best approach, but it is weird that I kind of think we should hold it down and see what happens to the market, but I don't know what's the best solution.
And how this is calculated, again, it's on a 12-month rolling average. So that hit we took in September is going to stay with us basically for 12 months because it's going to impact that calculation. If it was just a single month PCA, instead of 3.3 cents, it would be 16 cents. So it would be dramatic. And so it does dampen it.
So does that go to our residents right away, that first month, right?
Yes, and so we're always kind of backwards, if you will, because that's based on the previous 12 months, and that's what we charge to the next billing cycle. And so it's
worst case scenario, if you took that, we're at 2 right now, or 2.5?
2.5 was what we did last month because we saw such a severe.
But don't we see a drop in the winters? Like if we have,
but it's tied to the average cost, and so what it does is, if our average costs, we'll get the October bill 25th of this month. So if October of this year was less than the October of the previous year, the PCA will go down. If the October of this year is higher than the previous October, it will go up. And unfortunately, I think that's what will happen.
You think it's going up with?
Because the overall trend of what we're seeing on the wholesale market is it's trending up, just like, the gas pump, everything, everywhere you turn around right now is feeling that same thing. So it's really because of that averaging. It will only go down if this month is less than a year ago. And I don't think that will happen very often. I'm hoping it'll at least flatten out and not keep on that hockey stick.
Well, and with us holding it at the 2.5%, I'm hopeful that it's coming down at some point and we catch it up. So I would like to hold it for now and rediscuss it in the next month and see what happens. That's my opinion, because I think it was a smart call not to jump it. But you're saying it needs to be saying because it jumped in September to the 2.5 because it was 1.5.
Well, this jump again, it really should have been here.
Yeah, should have been.
And
3.
so I think in September we'll see that it's over here. It won't be quite as steep, but it still will most likely increase because this October will be more than the previous October. So the overall average of the math of that just works out that way.
So you're looking for some guidance tonight on whether to take the 1.2 out of the rainy day fund and.
Well, what the power board recommended, and I think we concur, is to authorize use of the rate stabilization fund up to $1.5 million in this fiscal year. And again, we'll work with Brian and Jeremy to see how much. Hopefully we won't have to use it all. And then what guidance, if we hold it at the 2.5. And the other thing with the rate study being done, I'm hoping within 3-4 months, we're going to have the results of that back. That'll be brought to the board. And what that most likely is going to do, I'll pretty well guess that it's going to show for a rate increase. And what that'll do, you'll see the rate come up and the PCA come down. So you'll be paying about the same either way, but it'll true up the PCA back down into where it more appropriately would be, if that makes sense. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I agree with these recommendations. I think the Power Board did a really good job of vetting this out, but this is, it's always hard when you have rate stabilization or rainy day funds because nobody ever wants to spend them when the rainy day comes. But this is a real classic example of something that couldn't have been anticipated, and it's the exact reason we have these funds. I think it's the right time to pull that trigger now. Something changes and we end the year and we don't need the money to make the company whole, then I like the recommendation of up to $1.5 million. And we can certainly get that authorization, but we'll bring you that number when the time comes to discuss what it is. But it helps us to recognize that we're not going to let our company slip into the negative cash flow wise while we wait for the new rate study, and gives us a little bit of clarity there. But a lot has been done to try to avoid this, and it's just one of those abnormal months, and you saw those graphs. It's
and if it makes you feel
definition.
any better, it didn't a whole lot to me, but I've talked to many UAMPS members that I can't repeat what one of them said to me when he said he opened his bill. So it's not just a Washington impact. And in fact, I learned today that one of the coal facilities that we're not part of, but other UAMPS members are, they're having coal supply issues, and that resource at least will be reduced. And so again, all these pressures, supply and demand, there's not a lot of things that are saying, hey, the prices are going to come down, unfortunately. And that's, but we got to keep the department financially. We're an enterprise fund, so we got to treat it just like it is a business, and we got to make sure it's financially stable and viable.
Council, are we in agreement with the Power Board's and staff's recommendations?
I am.
Happy to, you're that liaison, would be happy to entertain a motion to that effect.
Make a motion that we approve the rate stabilization fund for 1.5 million, up to 1.5 million, for the use at the discretion of the power director, manager, and finance director as fit to cover those funds.
Are you looking for any type of a motion on the PCA? We're holding the PCA, so there's no need to make a motion there.
As long as, I guess I don't know if we need an official
I'll add to
motion
my
on that.
motion as to hold the PCA where it's at for 2.5 for another month until
Okay, well, we can report on that.
report and see where we're at.
Right. Councilman Coates has put a motion on the table.
Second.
Councilmember Martinson has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? You have your direction.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm gonna work hard to bring back better news next time.
You, Rick.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor, can I ask
Your
a question?
graphs were
Please.
impressive, though.
Wow.
Your graphs were impressive.
Oh, thank you.
They were
Go ahead,
nice.
Councilman Ivy.
It wasn't for Rick, but I just wanted to ask
Oh.
if we could get information back on the money that we gave out of, I think it was some COVID money that we gave to the utility office for those that are in need. If we could just get an update on that amount, where that's at. I don't think that we would have it tonight. We don't need it tonight, but just if we could find out where that is.
I'll make a note and get you an update.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 12 is finance. Washington City Financial Quarterly Report. Finance Director Brian Brown.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was going to the wrong room last time, but I was able to get it this time, so we're good to go. So this is a quarterly report by law, by the state requirements. We are required to do a quarterly report to the council. And so what I did is I've listed the last 3 years for all the all funds in the city. Some of these are hard to see, but when I looked at this, you look at the general fund, just to discuss this. Sales tax, we're still in the same boat as we were last year. Golf course, we're still seeing the same kind of revenue. Community center, so everything's, and when you can compare quarters, we're still on the same path as we were last year. Some of the revenues that are down are due to impact fees, which I'll talk about in a minute. The one thing that did stand out is the sewer fund. Their expenses shot way up, and when I looked at that, it was due to the Long Valley trunk line. So those expenses are more of a one-time deal where we're working with that. We are 25% of the way through the fiscal year, and when you look at the general fund on expenses, we've spent 22% of the, compared to the budget where we spent 22 on operating expenses. So we're below. You'd estimate we'd be right around that 25%, but for the general fund, we're at 20%. Like I mentioned, the revenues are down on impact fees, and that's due to, compared to the first quarter for the last 3 years. Last year we did 223 building permits during that first quarter, where this year we've done 187. And like we've had discussions earlier tonight, what's going to happen, I can't predict it. But if you look at fiscal year 2021, we had 180, and that was our best year. We had 923 building permits issued that year. So we're right there. I can't predict where it'll be, but we could have a good year. It all depends on what happens. I always like to give you this, the RAP tax, where we're at, what we've collected, what we've distributed, what's committed toward the cultural arts and facility. So you can see where the balance on RAP tax is the 1.8. We have roughly about 700,000 committed, and then we have the 1.1 million uncommitted on RAP tax. I updated this graph because I didn't like the other one. I've only included, it had way too many on it. I've only included the major funds. So this is the first quarter in the last 2 years we've actually seen an increase on earned interest. So that was interesting to me we know interest rates have been going up, so that you can kind of see by fund where that stands. And then on the enterprise fund, I've listed all the operating revenue and expenses, so you can kind of see where water's been. You can see what Rick's talking about. The power costs have gone up, and the sewer, that Long Valley, the 1.8. You can see that the expenses are a little higher there due to the Long Valley trunk line. So there's a summary of for the last 3 years of all the enterprise operating revenues and expenses. And so that's briefly everything. A brief summary of the finances for Washington City. When I was putting this together, I wanted to see where the state stood and kind of what I could find. And so it was interesting. They were kind of in the same boat. And they said some of the risks we're facing in the state is limited labor supply, increasing costs, and housing affordability. And as I read that, that's exactly what we're facing here locally as a city. So do you have any questions for me regarding the quarterly report? And as we've talked tonight, we do want to watch this as we go forward in the future quarters, because we do watch, the one thing we do watch is sales tax. I pay attention to sales tax and building permits monthly to see where they're falling.
That's an excellent report. Council, questions for the finance director?
I don't have a question, Mayor, but just wanted to express appreciation. It's been expressed multiple times tonight, just the fiscal responsibility that our city has, and a lot of that is due to Brian and city manager. So really do appreciate that because we're in a really good spot for potential whatever that economy is going to do. So thank you.
Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Item 13, reports of officers from assigned committee. Start on down with you, Councilman Martinson.
I do not have anything to report.
It's just fine with me. Councilman Henderson.
I'm excited to report that I have a mosquito abatement committee meeting tomorrow afternoon, and I'll let you know the details when I get them.
I have no comment. You heard my report from Rick, so.
Yes, Mayor, I have something really fast. I think Steve's going to put up a picture that I'd like you to see. This picture right here was sent to me, thank you, Steve, was sent to me by a resident and just said, I think the caption was, look at our wonderful police officer cleaning the street. Oh, look at this awesome officer cleaning the street. So just want you to know that, you know, a lot of officers could just drive right past and let somebody else because it's not really their job. But this is just typical of what our officers and our firemen do for our city. I did have a ride along this last week with code enforcement, but I've already shared that. But I just wanted you to see that picture. You know, it's just, I wanted everyone to be able to see it. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.
I will go really fast because I feel a lot of pressure too.
No, but take your time.
We finished, I've been talking about this brochure and with the Washington City historical locations, and it is a map and you can do a walking tour. And so we finished that and we can distribute that. And then we also had our active transportation meeting today, and we've been discussing how to make our trails more safe because there's been some accidents, especially on Hellhole, where there's been, you know, we've had a death, and then we've also had some serious injuries. And so we've been trying to figure out what we can do. And so that's just something to be mindful of, and maybe you can have feedback as you think about what we can do for that particular spot, specifically with Hellhole. And I will be done after that. Done.
And we're ready for Veterans Day. I know you've been at all those committee meetings. Thank you, Council. I don't have anything to report tonight. Nothing from the city manager. Item 15, we do have need to go to closed session for purchase, exchange, release of property, and pending or potential litigation. If I could have a motion to that effect.
What's the motion needed for?
To go to closed session for purchase, exchange, release of property, and pending or potential litigation.
I'll just say so moved.
I have a motion by Martinson.
Second.
Did I hear a second? Second by Coates. All in favor? All in favor? It's either 4-0 or 5-0. I'm not sure, but we're going to closed session.
Recording stopped.